Hamel and Shreya, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, super excited.
I'm even more excited. Okay, so a couple years ago, I had never heard the term evals. Now it's one of the most trending topics on my podcast. Essentially, that to build great AI products, you need to be really good at building evals. Also, turns out some of the fastest growing companies in the world are basically building and selling and creating evals for AI labs. I just had the CEO of Mercor on the podcast. So there's something really big happening here. I want to use this conversation to basically help people understand the space deeply. But let's start with the basics. Just what the heck are evals? For folks that have no idea what we're talking about, give us just a quick understanding of what an eval is. And let's start with Hamel.
Sure. Evals is a way to systematically measure and improve an AI application. And it really doesn't have to be scary or unapproachable at all. It really is at its core data analytics on your LLM application in a systematic way of looking at that data and, where necessary, creating metrics around things so you can measure what's happening, and then so you can iterate and do experiments and improve.
So that's a really good broad way of thinking about it. If you go one level deeper, just to give people a very even more concrete way of imagining and visualizing what we're talking about, even if you have an example to show, would be even better. What's an even deeper way of understanding what an eval is?
Let's say you have a real estate assistant, application, and it's not working the way you want. It's not writing emails to customers the way you want, or it's not, calling the right tools, or any number of errors. And before evals, you would be left with guessing. You would maybe fix a prompt and hope that you're not breaking anything else with that prompt. And you might rely on vibe checks, which is totally fine. And vibe checks are good, and you should do vibe checks initially. But it can become very unmanageable very fast, because as your application grows, it's really hard to rely on vibe checks. You just feel lost. And so evals help you create metrics that you can use to measure how your application is doing and kind of give you a way to improve your application with confidence, that you have a feedback signal in which to iterate against.
So just to make it very real, so imagining this real estate agent, maybe they're helping you book a listing or go see an open house. The idea here is you have this agent talking to people, it's answering questions, pointing them to things. As a builder of that agent, how do you know if it's giving them good advice, good answers? Is it telling them things that are completely wrong? So the idea of evals essentially is to build a set of tests that tell you how often is this agent doing something wrong that you don't want it to do? And there's a bunch of ways wrong. You could define wrong. It could be just making up stuff. It could be just answering in a really strange way. The way I think about evals, and tell me if this is wrong, just simply is like unit tests for code. And then you're smiling. You're like, no, you idiot.
No, that's not what I was thinking.
Okay. Tell me. How does that feel as a metaphor?
So, okay. I like what you said first, which is we had a very broad definition. Evals is a big spectrum of ways to measure application quality. Now, unit tests are one way of doing this. Maybe there are some non-negotiable functionalities that you want your AI assistant to have, and unit tests are going to be able to check that. Now, maybe you also, because these AI assistants are doing such open-ended tasks, you kind of also want to measure how good are they at very vague or ambiguous things like responding to new types of user requests, or figuring out if there's new distributions of data, like new users are coming and using your real estate agent that you didn't even know would use your product. And then all of a sudden you think like, oh, there's a different way you want to kind of accommodate this new group of people. So evals could also be a way of looking at your data regularly to find these new cohorts of people. Evals could also be like metrics that, you just want to track over time. Like you want to track people saying, yes, thumbs up, I liked your message. You want to very, very basic things that are not necessarily AI related, but can go back into this flywheel of improving your product. So I would say overall, right, unit tests are a very small part of that very big puzzle.
Awesome. You guys actually brought an example of an eval just to show us exactly what the hell we're talking about. We're talking in these big ideas. So how about let's pull one up and show people here's what an eval is.
Yeah, let me just set the stage for it a little bit. So to echo what Shreya said, it's really important that we don't think of evals as just tests. There's a common trap that a lot of people fall into because they jump straight to the test, like, let me write some tests. And usually that's not what you want to do. You should start with some kind of data analysis to ground what you should even test. And that's a little bit different than software engineering, where you have a lot more expectations of how the system is going to work. With LLMs, it's a lot more surface area. It's very stochastic. So we kind of have a different flavor here. And so the example I'm going to show you today, it's actually a real estate example. It's a different kind of real estate example. It's from a company called NurtureBoss. I can share my screen to show you their website just to help you understand this use case a little bit. So let me share my screen. So this is a company that I worked with. It's called NurtureBoss, and it is a AI assistant for property managers who are managing apartments. And it helps with various tasks such as inbound leads, customer service, booking appointments, so on and so forth. Like all the different sort of operations you might be doing as a property manager, it helps you with that. And so, you can see kind of what they do. It's a very good example because it has a lot of the complexities of a modern AI application. So there's lots of different channels that you can interact through the AI with, like chat, text, voice, but also there's tool calls, lots of tool calls for like booking appointments, getting information about availability, so on and so forth. There's also RAG retrieval, getting information about customers and properties and things like that. So it's pretty fully fledged in terms of an AI application. And so they have been really generous with me in allowing me to use their data as a teaching example. And so we have anonymized it. But what I'm going to walk through today is, okay, let's do the first part of how we would start to build evals for NurtureBoss. Like, why would we even want to do that? So let's go through the very beginning stage, what we call error analysis, which is let's look at the data of their application and first start with what's going wrong. So I'm going to jump to that next. And I'm going to open an observability tool. And you can use whatever you want here. I just happen to have this data loaded in a tool called Brain Trust, but you can load it in anything. It's not, we don't have a favorite tool or anything. In the blog post that we wrote with you, we had the same example, but in Phoenix, Arise. And I think Aman on your blog post used Phoenix Arise as well. And there's also Langsmith. So these are kind of like different tools that you can use. So what you see here on the screen, this is logs from the application. And let me just show you how it looks. So what you see here is, and let me make it full screen. So this is one particular interaction that a customer had with the NurtureBoss application. And what it is a detailed log of everything that happened. So it's called a trace. And it's just an engineering term for logs of a sequence of events. The concept of a trace has been around for a really long time, but it's especially really important when it comes to AI applications. So we have all the different components and pieces and information that the AI needs to do its job, and we are logged all of it. And we're looking at a view of that. And so you see here a system prompt. The system prompt says, you are an AI assistant working as a leasing team member at Retreat at Acme Apartments. Remember, I said this is anonymized, so that's why the name is Acme Apartments. Your primary role is to respond to text messages from both residents and both current residents and prospective residents. Your goal is to provide accurate, helpful information, yada, yada, yada. And then there's a lot of detail around guidelines of how we want this thing to behave.
Is this their actual system prompt, by the way, for this company?
It is. Yes,
Amazing.
it is. It's a
That's
real
so cool.
system prompt.
That's amazing because it's rare you see an actual company product system prompt. That's like their crown jewels a lot of times. So this is actually very cool on its own.
Yeah, it's really cool. And, you see all of these different sort of features that they want to, are different use cases. So things about tour scheduling, handling applications, guidance on how to talk to different personas, so on and so forth. And you can see the user just kind of jumps in here. It says, ask, okay, do you have a 1-bedroom with study available? I saw it on virtual tours. And then you can see that the LLM calls some tools. It calls this get individuals information tool, and it pulls back that person's information, and then it gets the community's availability. So it's querying a database with the availability for that apartment complex. And then finally the AI responds, hey, we have several 1-bedroom apartments available, but none specifically listed with a study. Here are a few options. And then it says, can you let me know when one with a study is available? And then it says, I currently don't have specific information on the availability of a 1-bedroom apartment. User says, thank you. And the AI says, you're welcome. If you have any more questions, feel free to reach out. Now, this is an example of a trace. And we're looking at one specific data point. And so one thing that's really important to do when you're doing data analysis of your LLM application is to look at data. Now, you might wonder, there's a lot of these logs. It's kind of messy. There's a lot of things going on here. How in the hell are you supposed to look at this data? Do you want to just drown in this data? How do you even analyze this data? So it turns out there is a way to do it that is completely manageable. And it's not something that we invented. It's been around in machine learning and data science for a really long time, and it's called error analysis. And what you do is, the first step in conquering data like this is just to write notes, okay? So you got to put your product hat on, which is why we're talking to you, because product people have to be in the room, and they have to be involved in sort of doing this. Usually a developer is not suited to do this, especially if it's not a coding application.
And I'm just to mirror back why I think you're saying that is because this is the user experience of your product. People talking to this agent is the entire product essentially. And so it makes sense for the product person to be super involved in this.
Yeah. So let's reflect on this conversation. Okay, a user asked about availability. The AI said, oh, we don't really have that. Have a nice day. Now, for a product that is helping you with lead management, is that good? Like, do you feel like this is the way we want it to go?
Not ideal.
Yes, not ideal. And I'm glad you said that. A lot of people would say, oh, it's great. Like, the AI did the right thing. It said it said we didn't have available, and it's not available. But with your product hat on, that's not correct. And so what you would do is you would just write a quick note here. You would say, okay, you might pop in here. And you can write a note. So every observability application has the ability to write notes. And you wouldn't try to figure out if something is wrong in this application. In this case, it's kind of not doing the right thing. But you just write a quick note. Should have handed off to a human.
And as we watch this happening, it's like you mentioned this and you'll explain more. You're doing this feels very manual and unscalable. But as you said, this is just one step of the process and there's a system to this. And it's just the first part.
And you don't have to do it for all of your data. You sample your data and just take a look. And it's surprising how much you learn when you do this. Everyone that does this immediately gets addicted to it. And they say, this is the greatest thing that you can do when you're building an AI application. You just learn a lot. You're like, this is not how I want it to work. Okay. And so that's just an example. So you write this note. And then we can go on to the next trace. So this is the next trace. I just pushed a hotkey on my keyboard. Let me go back to looking at it.
And these tools make it easy to go through a bunch and add these notes quickly.
Yes. And so this is another one. Similar system prompt. We don't need to go through all of it again. We'll just jump right into the user question. Okay, I've been texting you all day. Maybe it's funny. And the user says, please. Okay, yeah, this one is just like an error in the application where, this is a text message application. And so, it's the channel through which the customer is communicating is through text message, and it's just getting like really garbled. And you can see here that it kind of doesn't make sense. Like the words are being cut off like in the meantime, and then the system doesn't know how to respond, because you know how people text message, they like write short phrases, they split their sentence across 4 or 5 different turns. So in this case,
what do you do with something like that?
Yeah, so this is a different kind of error. This is more of, hey, we're not handling this interaction correctly. This is more of a technical problem, rather than, hey, the AI is not doing exactly what we want. So we would write that down too.
Like, it's amazing you're catching that too here. Otherwise, you'd have no idea this was happening.
Yeah, you might not know this is happening, right? And so you would just say, okay, you would write a note like, conversation flow is janky because of text message.
And I like that. I like that you're using the word janky. It shows you just how informal this can be at this stage.
Yeah, it's supposed to be chill. Like, just don't overthink it. And there's a way to do this. So the question always comes up: how do you do this? Do you try to find all the different problems in this trace? What do you write a note about? And the answer is just write down the first thing that you see that's wrong, the most upstream error. Don't worry about all the errors. Just capture the first thing that you see that's wrong, and stop and move on. And you can get really good at this. The first 2 or 3 can be very painful, but we can do a bunch of them really fast. So here's another one. And let's skip the system prompt again. And the user asks, hey, I'm looking for a 2 to 3 bedroom with either 1 or 2 baths. Do you provide virtual tours? And a bunch of tools are called. And it says, hi, Sarah, currently we have 3-bedroom, 2.5 bathroom apartment available for $2,175. Unfortunately, we don't have any 2-bedroom options at the moment. We do offer virtual tours. You can schedule a tour, blah, blah. It just so happens that there's no virtual tour. Right? So,
nice.
It is hallucinating something that doesn't exist. And you kind of have to bring your context as an engineer, or even, product content, and say, hey, this is kind of weird. Like, we shouldn't be telling person about virtual tour when it's not offered. So you would say, okay, offered virtual tour. And you just write the note. So you can see there's a diversity of different kinds of errors that we're seeing. And we're actually learning a lot about your application in a very short amount of time.
One common question that we get from people at this stage is, okay, I understand what's going on. Can I ask an LLM to do this process for me?
Great question.
And I loved Hamel's most recent example, because what we usually find when we try to ask an LLM to do this error analysis is it just says the trace looks good, because it doesn't have the context needed to understand whether something might be, bad product smell or, not. For example, the hallucination about scheduling the tour, right? I can guarantee you, I would bet money on this. If I put that into ChatGPT and asked, is there an error? It would say, no, did a great job. But Hamel had the context of knowing, we don't actually have this virtual tour functionality, right? So I think in these cases, it's so important to make sure you are manually doing this yourself. And we can talk a little bit more about when to use LLMs in the process later. But like, number one pitfall right here is people are like, let me automate this with an LLM.
Do you think we'll get to a place where an agent can do this?
Oh,
has that
no.
context?
Sorry, there are parts of error analysis
Mm,
that an LLM is suited for, which we can talk
mm,
about later in this podcast. But right now, in this stage of freeform note
mm.
taking, is not the place for an
Got it.
LLM.
And this is something you call open coding. This step.
Yes, absolutely.
Cool. Another term that you used in your post that I love and that fits into this step is this idea of a benevolent dictator. Maybe just talk about what that is, and maybe Shreya cover that.
Yeah. So Hamel actually came up with this term.
Okay, maybe Ham will cover the answer.
No problem. And we'll actually show the LM automation in this example.
Oh, awesome.
Because we're going to take this example, we're going to go all the way through.
Amazing.
And so benevolent dictator is just a catchy term for the fact that when you're doing this open coding, a lot of teams get bogged down in having a committee do this. And for a lot of situations, that's wholly unnecessary. Like, people get really uncomfortable with, we want everybody on board, we want everybody involved, so on and so forth. You need to cut through the noise. In a lot of organizations, if you look really deeply, especially small, medium-sized companies, there's really, you can appoint one person whose taste that you trust. And you can do this with a small number of people and often one person. And it's really important to make this tractable. You don't want to make this process so expensive that you can't do it. You're going to lose out. So that's the idea behind benevolent dictator is, hey, you need to simplify this across as many dimensions as you can. Another thing that we'll talk about later is when you go to building an LLM as a judge, you need a binary score. You don't want to think about, is this like a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like assign a score to it. You can't, that's going to slow it down.
Just to make sure this benevolent dictator point is really clear, basically this is the person that does this note-taking, and ideally they're the expert on the stuff. So if it's law stuff, maybe there's like a legal person that owns this. It could be a product manager. Give us advice on who this person should be.
Yeah, it should be the person with domain expertise. So in this case, it would be the person who understands the business of leasing, apartment leasing, and has context to understand if this makes sense. It's always a domain expert, like you said. Okay, for legal, it would be a law person. For mental health, it would be the mental health expert, whether that's like a psychiatrist or, someone else.
Cool.
Oftentimes it is the product manager.
Cool. So the advice here, pick that person. May not feel so super fair that they're the one in charge and they're the dictator, but they're benevolent. It's going to be okay.
Yeah, it's going to be okay. You're just trying to, it's not perfection. You're just trying to make progress and get signal quickly so you have an idea of what to work on, because it can become infinitely expensive if you're not careful.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Let's go back to your examples.
Yeah, no problem. So this is another example where we have someone saying, okay, do you have any specials? And the assistant or the AI responds, hey, we have a 5% military discount. User responds, and it switches the subject. Can you tell me how many floors there are? Do you have any one bedrooms available or one bedrooms on the first floor? And the AI responds, yeah, okay, we have several one bedroom apartments available. And then the user wants to confirm any of those on the first floor. And how much are the one bedrooms? And then also, is a current resident. So they're also asking, I need a maintenance request. This is actually pretty, you could see the messiness of the real world in here. And the assistant just calls a tool that says transfer call, but it doesn't say anything. It just abruptly does transfer call. So it's pretty jank, I would say. It's just not,
another jank.
Another kind of jank, a different kind of jank. So you don't want to, when you write the open note, you don't want to say jank, because what we want to do is we want to understand what, and when we look at the notes later on, we want to understand what happened. So you just want to say, did not confirm call transfer with user. It doesn't have to be perfect. You just have to have a general idea of what's going on.
Cool.
So, okay. So let's say we do, and Shreya and I, we recommend doing at least 100 of these. The question is always how many of this do you do? And so there's not a magic number. We say 100, is because we know that as soon as you start doing this, once you do 20 of these, you will automatically find it so useful that you will continue doing it. So we just say 100 to mentally unblock you so it's not intimidating. Like, don't worry, you're only going to do 100. And there is a term for that so the right answer is keep looking at traces until you feel like you're not learning anything new. Maybe Shreya should talk about
Yeah, so there's actually a
that.
term in data analysis and qualitative analysis called theoretical saturation. So what this means is when you do all of these processes of looking at your data, when do you stop? It's when you are theoretically saturating, or you're not uncovering any new types of notes, new types of concepts, or nothing that will like materially change the next part of your process. And this kind of takes a little bit of intuition to develop. So typically people don't really know when they've reached theoretical saturation yet. That's totally fine. When you do 2 or 3 examples or rounds of this, like you will develop the intuition. A lot of people realize like, oh, okay, like I only need to do 40. I only need to do 60. Actually, I only need to do like 15. I don't know, like depends on the application and develops like depends on how savvy you are with error analysis for sure.
And your point about you probably want to, you're going to want to do a bunch. I imagine it's because you're just like, oh, I'm discovering all these problems. I got to see what else is going on here.
Exactly.
Right?
And
Okay.
promise at some point, you're like not going to discover new types of problems.
Yeah. Awesome. So let's say you did 100 of these. What's the next step?
Yeah, okay, so you did 100 of these. Now you have all these notes. So this is where you can start using AI to help you. So the part where you looked at this data is important. Like we discussed, you don't want to automate this part too much.
Humans will still have jobs. This is a takeaway here. That's great.
Yes.
Just reviewing traces. At least there's one job left for now.
Yeah.
Great.
So, yeah, exactly. And so, okay, you have all these notes. Now, to turn this into something useful, you can do basic counting. So basic counting is the most powerful analytical technique in data science because it's so simple and it's kind of undervalued in many cases. And so it's very approachable for people. And so the first thing you want to do is take these notes and you can categorize them with an LLM. And so there's a lot of different ways to do that. Right before this podcast, I took 3 different coding agents or, AI tools and had it categorize these notes. So one is, okay, I uploaded into a Claude project. I uploaded a CSV of these notes and I just exported them directly from this interface. There's a lot of different ways to do this, but I'm showing you the simple, stupid way, the most basic way of doing things. And so I dumped the CSV in here and I said, please analyze the following CSV file. And I told it there's a metadata field that has a note in it. But what I said is I used the word open codes. And I said, hey, I have different open codes. And that's a term of art. That's LLMs know what open codes are and they know what axial codes are because it is a concept that's been around for a really long time. So those words help me shortcut like what I'm trying to do.
That's awesome. And the end of the prompt is telling it to create axial codes.
Yes, creating axial codes. So what it does is,
so maybe it's worth talking about what
yeah.
are axial codes, or like what's the point here, right? You have a mess of open codes, right? And you don't have 100 distinct problems. Actually, many of them are repeats, but because you phrased them differently, right? And in that, you shouldn't have tried to create your taxonomy of failures as your open coding. You just want to get down what's wrong and then organize, okay, what's the most common failure mode? So the purpose, axial code basically is just a failure mode. It's like the label or category. And what our goal is to get to this clusters of failure modes and figure out what is the most prevalent. So then you can go and run and attack that problem.
That is really helpful. Basically, you're just synthesizing all these categories and themes. Super cool. And we'll include this prompt in our show notes for folks so they don't have to like sit there and screenshot it and try to type it out themselves.
Yeah, great idea. And so Claude went ahead and analyzed the CSV file, decided how to parse it, blah, blah. We don't need to worry about all that stuff. But it came up with a bunch of axial codes. Basically, axial codes are categories, like Shreya said. So one is, okay, capability limitations, misrepresentation, process and protocol violations, human handoff issues, communication quality. It created these categories. Now, do I like all the categories? Not really. I like some of them. It's a good first stab at it. I would probably rename it a little bit because some of them are a bit too generic. Like, what is capability limitations? That's a little bit too broad. It's not actionable. I want to get a little bit more actionable with it so that if I do decide it's a problem, I know what to do with it. But we'll discuss that in a little bit. So you can do this with anything, and this is the dumbest way to do it, but dumb sometimes is a good way to get started. So,
and this is what LMs are really good at, taking a bunch of information and synthesizing.
Absolutely. Synthesizing for us to make sense of, right? Note that, it's not telling us, it's not automatically proposing fixes or anything. That's our job. But, now we can wade through this mess of open codes a lot easier. Another thing that's interesting here in this prompt to generate the axial codes is you can be very detailed if you want, right? You can say, I want each axial code to actually be, some actionable failure mode. And maybe the LLM will understand that and propose it. Or I want you to group these open codes by, what stage of the user story that it's in. So this is where you can, be creative or do what's best for you as a product manager or engineer working on this, and that will help you do the improvement later.
So there's no definitive prompt of here's the one way to do it. You're
Absolutely.
saying you can iterate, see what works for you.
Absolutely.
It's interesting the tools don't do this, or do they try and they just don't do a great job?
No, I don't think they do it. We've been screaming
even
from
do
the
it.
rooftops, please
wow.
do this. I do think it's a little bit hard, right? Part of this whole experience with the Evals course Hamel and I are teaching are a lot of people don't actually know this. So maybe it's that people don't know this and they don't know how to build tools for it. And hopefully we can demystify some of this magic.
And just to double click on this point, this is not a thing everyone does or knows. This is something you two developed based on your experience doing data analysis and data science at other companies.
Well, I want to caveat it. We didn't invent error analysis. We don't actually want to invent things. That's bad signal. If somebody is coming to you with a way to do something that's entirely new and not grounded in hundreds of years of theory and literature, then you should, be a little bit wary of that. But what we tried to do was distill, okay, what are the new tools and techniques that you need to make sense of the LLM error analysis? And then we created a curriculum or structured way of doing this. So this is all very tailored to LLMs. But, the terms open coding, axial coding are grounded in social science.
Amazing. Okay. What's funny about you guys doing this is I just want to go do this somewhere. I don't have an AI product to do this on, but it's just this would be so fun. Just sit there and find all the problems I'm running into and categorize them and then try to fix them. Delightful.
I love that.
Hamel pulled up a video. What do you got going on here?
Yeah. So I pulled up a video just to drive home Shreya's point. We are not inventing anything. So what you see on the screen here is Andrew Ng, one of the famous machine learning researchers in the world who have taught a lot of people, frankly, machine learning. And you can see this is an 8-year-old video. And he's talking about error analysis. And so this is a technique that's been used to analyze stochastic systems for ages. And it's something that if you're just using the same machine learning ideas and principles, just bringing them into here. Because again, these are stochastic systems.
Awesome. Well, one thing, we're working on getting Andrew on the podcast. We're chatting, so that'll be really fun. Two, I love that my podcast episode that just came out today is in your feed there, and it's standing out really well in that feed. So I'm really happy about that thumbnail.
Very nice. Yeah, the recommendation algorithm is quite
yes. Good. Here we go. You hope you click on that. Don't screw my algorithm. Okay, cool. So we've done some synthesis. I know we're not going to go through the entire step. This is you have a whole course that takes many days to learn this whole process. What else do you want to share about how to go about this process?
Okay, so you can do this through anything, and I've used the same thing works just fine in ChatGPT. The same exact prompt. You can see it made axial codes. I really like using Julius AI. That's one of my favorite tools. Julius is kind of his third-party tool, but it uses notebooks. I personally like Jupyter notebooks a lot, and so it's more of a data science thing, but a lot of product managers are kind of learning notebooks nowadays, and it's kind of cool. It's like a fun playground where you can write code and look at data. But we don't have to go deeply into that. Just wanted to mention you can use a lot, AI is really good at this. So let's go into the fun part.
Here we go.
So now we have these axial codes. So the first thing I like to do, I have these open codes, right? And I have the axial codes that, let's say, that we assigned from the Claude project or the ChatGPT. And so what I do is I collect them first, and I take a look, like, does these axial codes make sense? And I look at the correspondence between the different axial codes and the open codes, and I go through an exercise and I say, do I like these codes? Like, can I make them better? Can I refine them? Can I make them more specific? Instead of like being generic, I make them very specific and actionable. So you see the ones that I came up with here are tour scheduling, rescheduling issues, human handoff or transfer issue, formatting error with an output, conversational flow. We saw the conversational flow issue with the text messages, making follow-up promises not kept. And so basically what you can do now is, like, you have these axial codes. And so I just collect them into a list. So this is an Excel formula. Just collect these codes into a list. And now we have a comma separated list of these codes. And then what you can simply do is you could take your notes that you have, those open codes, and you can tell an AI, and this is using Gemini and AI, just for simplicity. This is like again, we're trying to keep it simple. Categorize the following note into one of the following categories. That's
By
all.
the way, this for folks watching, there's like, I like all these different prompts and formulas you're sharing. This is like the Google Sheets AI prompt.
Huge fan.
Yeah.
Mm.
And so basically what you can do is you can categorize your traces into one of the buckets. And that's what we have here. We have categorized all those problems that we encountered into one of these things.
And this is automatic, which is very exciting. I mean, the AI is doing it. So this also drives home the point that your open codes have to be detailed, right? You can't just say janky, because if the AI is reading janky, it's not going to be able to categorize it. Even a human wouldn't, right? It would have to go and remember why you said janky. So it's important to be, somewhat detailed in your open code.
Okay, so avoid the word janky is a good rule of thumb.
Or have it with like 10 other words.
Okay.
Yeah, I was being funny.
Yeah. Okay. What are some of those other words that people often use that you think are not good?
I don't think it's specific words. I think it's just people are not detailed enough in the open code, so it's hard to do the categorization.
Great. And by the way, the reason you have to map them back is because, say, Claude or ChatGPT gave you suggestions and you changed them and iterated on them. So it doesn't, you can't just go back and say, cool, what are in each bucket?
Yeah.
Great.
That's a really good question, actually. It's good to iterate and think about it a little bit. Like, do I like these open codes? Do these actually make sense to me? Just like anything that AI does, it's really good to kind of put yourself in the middle.
Yeah,
just a little bit.
In the loop. Still space for us. Great.
Yeah.
One of the things that I like to do in this step, if I'm trying to use AI to do this labeling, is also have a new category called none of the above. So an AI can actually say none of the above in the axial code, and that informs me, okay, my axial codes are not complete. Like, let's go look at those open codes. Let's figure out what some new categories are, or figure out how to reword my other axial codes.
Awesome. And what's cool about this is you don't need to do this many, many times. Like, for most products, you do this process once and then you build on it, I imagine, and you just tweak it over time.
Absolutely. And it gets so fast. Like, people do this like once a week, and you can do all of this in like 30 minutes. And like suddenly your product is like so much better than if you were never aware of any of these problems.
Yeah, it's absurd to feel like you wouldn't know this is happening. Like, watching this happening, I'm like, how could you not do this to your product?
A lot of people have no idea.
Most people.
Yeah. We'll talk about that. There's a whole debate around this stuff that we want to talk about. Okay, cool. So you have this sheet. What comes next?
Okay, so here's the big unveil. This is the magic moment right now. So we have all these codes we applied, the ones that we like on our traces. Now you can do the ta-da, you can count them. So here's a pivot table, and we just can do pivot table on those. And we can count how many times those different things occurred. So what do we find? Found on these like traces that we categorized, we found 17 conversational flow issues. And I really like pivot tables because you can do cool things. You can like double click on these. You can say, oh, okay, let me take a look at those. But that's going into an aside about pivot tables, how cool they are. But you know, now we have just a nice rough cut of what are our problems. And now we have gone from chaos to some kind of thinking around, oh, you know what? These are my biggest problems. I need to fix conversational issues, maybe these human handoff issues. It's not necessarily the count is the most important thing. There might be something that's just really bad and you want to fix that. But okay, now you have some way of looking at your problem. And now you can think about whether you need evals for some of these. So, with there might be some of these things that might be just dumb engineering errors that you don't need to write an eval for because it's very obvious on how to fix them. Maybe the formatting error with output, maybe you just forgot to tell the LLM how you want it to be formatted. And you didn't even say that in the prompt. So just go ahead and fix the prompt, maybe, and we can decide okay, do you want to write an eval for that? You might still want to write an eval for that because you might be able to test that with just code. You could just test the string. Does it have the right formatting potentially without running an LLM? So there's a cost benefit trade-off to evals. You don't want to get carried away with it. But you want to usually ground yourself in your actual errors. You don't want to skip this step. And so the reason I'm kind of spending so much time on this is this is where people get lost. They go straight into evals. let me just write some tests. And that is where things go off the rails. So let's say we want to tackle one of these things. So for example, let's say we want to tackle this human handoff issue. And we're like, I'm not really sure how to fix this. That's a kind of subjective sort of judgment call on, should we be handing off to a human? And I don't know immediately how to fix it. It's not super obvious per se. Yeah, I can change my prompt, but I'm not sure. I'm not 100% sure. Well, that might be sort of an interesting thing for an LLM as a judge, for example. So there's different kinds of evals. One is code-based, which you should try to do if you can, because they're cheaper. You don't have to, LLM as a judge is something, it's like a meta eval. You have to eval that eval to make sure the LLM that's judging is doing the right thing, which we'll talk about in a second. So, okay, LLM as a judge, that's one thing. Okay, how do you build an LLM as a judge?
Before we get into that, actually, just to make sure people know exactly what you're describing there, these two types of evals. One is, you said it's code-based, one is LLM as judge. Maybe Shreya, just help us understand what code-based eval even is. It's just it's essentially a unit test. Is that a simple way to think about it?
Maybe eval is not the right term here, but think automated evaluator. So when we find these failure modes, one of the things we want is okay, can we now go check the prevalence of that failure mode in an automated way without me manually labeling and doing all the coding and the grouping, and I want to run it on thousands and thousands of traces. I want to run it every week. That is, okay, you should probably build an automated evaluator to check for that failure mode. Now, when we're saying code-based versus LLM-based, we're saying, okay, so maybe I could write a Python function or a piece of code to check whether that failure mode is present in a trace or not. And that's possible to do for certain things like checking the output is JSON, or checking that it's markdown or checking that it's short. These are all things you can capture in code, or you can approximately capture in code. When we're talking about LLM judge here, we're saying that this is a complex failure mode that we don't know how to evaluate in an automated way. So maybe we will try to use an LLM to evaluate this very, very narrow, specific failure mode of handoffs.
So just to try to mirror back where you're describing, you want to test what your, say, agent or AI product is doing. You ask it a question, it gets back with something. One way to test if it's giving you the right answer is if it's consistently doing the same thing, that you could write a code to tell you this is true or false. For example, will it ever say there's a virtual tour? So you could ask
Yes.
it, do you provide virtual tours? It says yes or no, and then you could write code to tell you if it's correct based on that specific answer. But if you're asking about something more complicated and it's not binary, you almost need, like in a one world, you need a human to tell you this is correct. The solution to avoid humans having to review all this every time automatically is LLMs replacing human judgment, and you'd call it a LLM as judge. The LLM as being the judge if this is correct or not.
Absolutely. You nailed it.
Great.
So people always think like, oh, like this is at least as hard as my problem of creating the original agent. And it's not, because you're asking the judge to do one thing, evaluate one failure mode. So the scope of the problem is very small. And the output of this LLM judge is like pass or fail. So it is a very, very tightly scoped thing that LLM judges are very capable of doing very reliably.
And the goal here is just to have a suite of tests that run before you ship to production that tell you things are going the way you want them to, the way your agent is interacting is
The
correct.
beautiful thing about LLM judges, you can use them in unit tests or CI, sure, but you could also use it online for monitoring, right? Like I can sample like 1,000 traces every day, run my LLM judge, real production traces, and see what the failure rate is there. This is not a unit test, right? But still, now we get like an extremely specific measure of application quality.
Cool. That's a really great point, because a lot of people diss evals for being this like not real life thing. It's a thing that you test before it's actually in the real world. And what's actually happening in the real world, you're saying you should actually do exactly that.
Yeah.
Test your real thing running in production.
You-
and
yeah.
it's like a daily, hourly sort of thing you could be running.
Totally.
Awesome. Okay. Hamel's got a example of an actual LM as judge eval here. So let's take a look.
I love how Shreya really teed it up for me. So thank you so much. So what we have is a LM as a judge prompt for this one specific failure. Like Shreya said, you would want to do one specific failure and you want to make it binary, because we want to simplify things. We don't want, hey, like score this on a rating of 1 to 5. Like, how good is it? That's just mostly, in most cases, that's a weasel way of like not making a decision. Like, no, you need to make a decision. Is this good enough or not? Yes or no? It can be painful to think about what that is, but you should absolutely do it. Otherwise, this thing becomes very untractable. And then when you report these metrics, no one knows what 3.2 versus 3.7 means.
We see this all the time also. And even with like expert curated content on the internet, where it's like, oh, here's your LLM judge evaluator prompt. Here's a 1 to 7 scale. And I always think, I always text Hamel like, oh no, like now we have to fight the misinformation again, because we know somebody's going to try it out and then come back to us and say, oh, I have 4.2 average. And we're going to be like, okay.
It's wild how much drama there is in the evals space. We're going to get to that. Oh, man. This episode is brought to you by Mercury. I've been banking with Mercury for years, and honestly, I can't imagine banking any other way at this point. I switched from Chase, and holy moly, what a difference. Sending wires, tracking spend, giving people on my team access to move money around, so freaking easy. Where most traditional banking websites and apps are clunky and hard to use, Mercury is meticulously designed to be an intuitive and simple experience. And Mercury brings all the ways that you use money into a single product, including credit cards, invoicing, bill pay, reimbursements for your teammates, and capital. Whether you're a funded tech startup looking for ways to pay contractors and earn yield on your idle cash, or an agency that needs to invoice customers and keep them current, or an e-commerce brand that needs to stay on top of cash flow and excess capital, Mercury can be tailored to help your business perform at its highest level. See what over 200,000 entrepreneurs love about Mercury. Visit mercury.com to apply online in 10 minutes. Mercury is a fintech, not a bank. Banking services provided through Mercury's FDIC-insured partner banks. For more details, check out the show notes.
Okay, so this is your judge prompt. There's no one way to do it. it's okay to use an LLM to help you create it, but again, put yourself in the loop. Don't just blindly accept what the LLM does. And in all of these cases, that's what we did. Like with the axial codes, we kind of iterated on this. You can use an LLM to like help you create this prompt, but make sure you read it, make sure you edit it, whatever. This is not necessarily the perfect prompt. This is just the stupid, like keeping it very simple just to show you the idea is like, okay, for this handoff failure, I said, okay, I want you to output true or false. So it's binary. It's a binary judge. That's what we recommend. And then I just go through and say, okay, like when should you be doing a handoff? And I just list them out. Like, okay, explicit human request ignored or looped, some policy mandated transfer, sensitive resident issues, tool data unavailability, same day walk-in or tour requests. You need to talk to a human for that, so on and so forth, right? And so the idea is like, now that I know that this is a failure from my data, I'm interested in iterating on it because I know this is actually happening all the time. And like Shreya said, like it would be nice to have a way not only to evaluate this on like the data I have, but also on production data, just to get a sense of like, well, what scale is this happening? Let me find more traces. Let me have a way to iterate on this. And so we can take this prompt, and I'm going to use a spreadsheet again. So the first step is, okay, when I'm doing this judge, I wrote the prompt. Now, a lot of people stop there and they say, okay, I have my judge prompt, we're done. Good. Like, let's just ship it. And the prompt says, if the judge says it's wrong, it's wrong. They just like accept it as the gospel, be like, okay, the LM says wrong, it must be wrong. Don't do that. Because that's the fastest way that you can have evals that don't match what's going on. And when people lose trust in your evals, they'll lose trust in you. So it's really important that you don't do that. And so before you release your LM as a judge, you want to make sure it's aligned to the human. So how do you do that? Is you have those axial codes, and you want to like measure your judge against the axial code and say like, hey, does it agree with me? Does my own judge, does it agree with me? Just measure it. And so what we have here is, okay, I say assess this LLM trace. Again, I'm using just spreadsheets here. Assess this LLM trace according to these rules. And the rules are just the prompt that I just showed you. And I ask it, okay, is there a handoff error? True or false? So then this column, let me just zoom in a bit. Column H, I have, okay, did this error occur? And column G is whether I thought the error occurred or not.
And you can see you going through it manually, you do that.
Yeah. And which we already did. We already went through it manually. So it's not like we have to do it again because we kind of have that cheat code from the axial coding. We already did it. You might have to go through it again if you need more data. And there's a lot of details to this on like how to do this correctly. You want to split your data and do all these things so that you're not cheating. But I just want to show you the concept. And basically, what you can do is measure the agreement. Now, one thing you should know as a product manager is a lot of people go straight to this like agreement. They say, okay, my judge agrees with the human at some percentage of the time. Now, that sounds appealing, but it's a very dangerous metric to use because a lot of times errors have, they only happen on the long tail and they don't happen as frequently. So like if you only have the error 10% of the time, then you can easily have 90% agreement by just having a judge say it passes all the time. Does that make sense? So like 90% agreement might look good on paper, but it might be misleading. And
it's a rare error.
Yeah. So, as a product manager or someone, even if you're not doing this calculation yourself, if someone ever reports to you agreement, you should immediately ask, okay, tell me more. Like you need to look into it. To give you more intuition, here is like a matrix, okay, of this specific judge in the Google Sheet. And this is again a pivot table, just keeping it dumb and simple. Is okay, on the rows, I have what did the human think? What did I think? did it have an error, true or false? And then did my judge have an error, true or false?
The intuition here is exactly what Hamill said, right? You need to look at each type of error. So when the human said false, but the judge said true, or vice versa. So those non-green diagonals here. And if they're too large, then go iterate on your prompt. Make it more clear to the LLM judge so that you can reduce that misalignment. You want to get to a point where you're going to have some misalignment. That's okay. We talk about in our course also how to code correct that misalignment. But in this stage, if you're a product manager and the person who's building the LLM judge eval has not done this, they're saying like, oh, it agrees 75% of the time, we're good. They don't like have this matrix and they haven't iterated to make sure that these two types of errors have gone down to zero, then it's a bad smell. Go and ask them to go fix that.
Awesome. That's a really good tip is what to look for when someone's doing this wrong.
Yeah.
Actually, can you take us back to the LLM as judge prompt? I just want to highlight something really interesting here. I've had some guests on the podcast recently who've been saying evals are the new PRDs. And if you look at this is exactly what this is. Like, product managers, product teams write, here's what the product should be, here's all the requirements, here's like how it should work. They built the thing and then they test it manually often. What's cool about this is exactly that same thing, and it's running constantly. It's telling you, here's how this agent should respond in very specific ways. If it's this, do that. If it's this, that, do that. And so it's exactly what I've been hearing again and again. You could see it right here. This is like the purest sense of what a product requirements document should be, is this eval judge that's telling you exactly what it should be, and it's automatic and running constantly.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of derived from our own data. So of course it's a product manager's expectations. What I find that a lot of people miss is they just put in what their expectations are before looking at their data. But as we look at our data, we uncover more expectations that we couldn't have dreamed up in the first place, and that ends up going into this prompt.
So that is interesting. So it's not, so your advice is not skip straight to evals and LLM as judge prompts before you build the product. Still write traditional one-pagers, PRDs, to tell your team what we're doing, why we're doing it, what success looks like. But then at the end, you could probably pull from that and even improve that original PRD if you're evolving the product using this process.
I would go even further to say you're going to improve. It's going to change. You're never going to know what the failure modes are going to be up front. And you're always going to uncover new vibes that you think that your product should have, right? You don't really know what you want until you see it with these LLMs. So you got to be kind of flexible, have to look at your data, PRDs are a great abstraction for thinking about this, but it's not the end all be all. It's going to change.
I love that. And Hamill's pulling up some cool research report. What's this about?
Oh, this is one of the coolest research reports you can possibly read if you want to know about evals. So it was authored by someone named Shreya Shankar.
Oh my God.
And her collaborators. And so it's called Who Validates the Validators?
That is the best name for a research.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
So I should let Shreya talk about this. I think one of the most important things to pay attention to in this paper are the criteria drift.
Yeah.
And what she found.
So we did this super fun study when we were kind of doing user studies with people who were trying to write LLM judges or just validate their own LLM outputs. And this was before evals was like extremely popular, I feel like, on the internet. We did this project like late 2023 was when we started it. But then the thing that really was burning in my mind as a researcher is like, why is this problem so hard? We've been having machine learning and AI for so long. It's not new, but suddenly this time around, everything is really difficult. So we just did this user study with a bunch of developers and we realized, okay, what's new here is that you can't figure out your rubrics up front. People's opinions of good and bad change as they review more outputs. They think of failure modes only after seeing 10 outputs they would never have dreamed of in the first place. And these are experts, right? These are people who have built many LLM pipelines and now agents before. And it's just, you can't ever dream up everything in the first place. And I think that's so key in today's world of AI development.
Okay, that is a really good point. That's very much reinforcing what we were just talking
Yeah.
about, and that's why Ham will pull this up. Is just okay.
The
You still got to
research
do.
behind it.
Yeah. Okay. Great. You still got to do product the same way, but now you have this really powerful tool that helps you make sure what you've built is correct. It's not going to replace the PRD process. Cool. How many evals of these? How many, say, I don't know, anonymous judge prompts do you end up with usually? Say, I don't know. Like, I know obviously depends complexity of the product, but what's like a number in your experience?
For me, like between 4 and 7.
Oh, that's it.
It's not that many because a lot of the failure modes, as Hamel said earlier, can be fixed by just fixing your prompt. You just didn't think to put it in your prompt, so now you put it in your. You shouldn't do an eval like this for everything. Just the pesky ones that you've described your ideal behavior in your agent prompt, but it's still failing.
Got it. So say you found a problem, you fixed it. In traditional software development, you'd write a unit test to make sure it doesn't happen again. Is your insight here is don't even bother writing an eval around that if it's just gone?
I think you can if you want to, but the whole game here is about prioritizing. You have finite resources and finite time. You can't write an eval for everything, so prioritize the ones that are the more pesky areas.
And probably the ones that are most risky to your business if they say
Yes.
something like Mecha Hitler, Grok.
Yikes.
Cool. Okay, so that's very relieving that because this prompt is like a lot of work to really think
Yeah.
through all these details.
But it's a
So
lot of
that's
one-time cost. Right now,
Right,
forever,
right.
you can run this on your application.
right.
And I want to say, okay, data analysis is super powerful. It's going to drive lots of improvements very quickly to your application. We showed the most basic kind of data analysis, which is counting, which is accessible to everyone. You can get, more sophisticated with the data analysis. There's lots of different ways to sample, look at data. We kind of made it look easy in a sense, but there's a lot of skills here to do to it well. Building an intuition and a nose for how to sort through this data. For example, let's say I find conversational issues, this like conversational flow issues. Maybe if I was trying to chase down this problem further, I would think about ways to find other conversational flow issues that I didn't code. I would maybe dig through the data in several ways. And there's, different ways to go about this. It's very similar, if not almost exactly similar as kind of traditional analytics techniques that you would do on any product.
Give us just a quick sense of what comes next, and then let's talk about the debate around evals and a couple more things.
So what comes next after you've built your LLM judge? Well, we find that people just try to use that everywhere they can. So they will put the LLM judge in unit tests, and they will know, like, oh, here are some example traces where we saw that failure because we labeled it. Now we're going to make those part of unit tests and make sure that every time we push a change to our code, these tests are going to pass. They also use it for online monitoring. People are making dashboards on this. And I think that's incredible. I think like the products that are doing this, right, they have a very sharp sense of how well their application is performing. And people don't talk about it because this is their moat, right? So people are not going to go and share all of these things because it makes sense, right? If you are an email writing assistant and you're doing this and you're doing it well, you don't want somebody else to go and build an email writing assistant and then kind of get you out of business. So I really want to stress the point that it's like try to use these artifacts that you're building wherever possible, online, repeatedly, use them to drive improvements to your product. Oftentimes, Hamel and I will we'll tell people how to do this up to this very point, and it clicks for people, and then they like never come back again. So either they have, I don't know, quit their jobs, they're not doing AI development anymore, or they know what to do from here on out. I think it's the latter, but I think it's very powerful.
Like just watching you do this really opened my eyes to what this is and how systematic the process is.
Yes.
I always imagine you just sit on a computer. Okay, what are the things I need to make sure work correctly? And what you're showing us here is it's a very simple step-by-step based on real things that are happening in your product, how to catch them, identify them, prioritize them, and then catch them
Absolutely.
if they happen again and fix them.
Yeah, it's not magic. Like anyone can do this. You're going to have to practice the skill. Like any new skill, you have to practice, but you can do it. And I think what's very empowering now is that product managers are doing this and can do this and can really build very, very profitable products with this skill set.
Okay. Great segue to a debate that we kind of got pulled into that was happening on X the other day. I did not realize how much controversy and drama there is around evals. There's a lot of people with very strong opinions. So how about Shreya, give us just a sense of the two sides of the debate around the importance and value of evals, and then give us your perspective.
Yeah. So, all right, I'll be a little bit placating and I say I think everyone is on the same side. I think the misconception is that people have very rigid definitions of what evals is. For example, they might think that evals is just unit tests, or they might think that evals is just the data analysis part and no online monitoring or no monitoring of product specific metrics like actually number of chats engaged in or whatnot. So I think everyone has a different mindset of evals going in. And the other thing I will say is that people have been burned by evals in the past. So I think people have done evals badly. One concrete example of this is they've tried to do an LLM judge, but it has not aligned with their expectations. They only uncovered this later on, and then they didn't trust it anymore. And then they're like, oh, I'm anti-evals. And I 100% empathize with that because you should be anti Likert scale LLM judge. I absolutely agree with you. We are anti that as well. So a lot of the misconception stems from two things, right? Like people having a narrow definition of evals and then people not doing it well and then getting burned and then wanting to avoid other people making that mistake. And then unfortunately, X or Twitter is like a medium where, people are misinterpreting what everybody is saying all the time. And you just get all these strong opinions of like, don't do evals. It's bad. We tried it. It doesn't work. We're Claude Code or, whatever other famous product, and we don't do evals. And there's just so much nuance behind all of it because a lot of these applications are standing on the shoulders of evals. Coding agents is a great example of that. Claude Code, right? They are standing on the shoulders of Claude. Not base, but the fine-tuned Claude models have been evaluated on many coding benchmarks. Can't argue against that.
And just to make clear exactly what you're talking about there, one of the heads, I think maybe the head engineer of Claude Code went on a podcast and he's like, oh, we don't do evals, we just vibe. We just look at vibes. And vibes meaning they just use it and feel if it's right or wrong.
And I think that kind of works. So there's two things to that. Right. One is they're standing on the shoulders of the evals that their colleagues are doing for coding.
Of the Claude foundational model.
Absolutely. Right. We know that they report those numbers because we see the benchmarks. We know who's doing well on those. The other thing is they are actually probably very systematic about the error analysis to some extent. I bet you that they are monitoring who is using Claude, how many people are using Claude, how many chats are being created, how long these chats are. They're also probably monitoring in their internal team. They're dogfooding. Anytime something is off, they maybe have a queue or they send it to the person developing Claude Code. And this person is implicitly doing some form of error analysis that Hamel talked about. All of this is evals. Right? There's no world in which they are just being like, I made Claude Code. I'm never looking at anything. And unfortunately, right, when you don't think about that or talk about that, I think that most of the community is beginners, right? Or people who don't know about evals and want to learn about it. And it sends the wrong message there. Now, I don't know what Claude Code is doing, obviously, but I would be willing to bet money that they're doing something in the form of evals.
We'll also say that coding agents are fundamentally very different than other AI products because the developer is the domain expert. So you can short circuit a lot of things. And also the developer is using it all day long. So there's a type of dogfooding and type of domain expertise that is, you can collapse the activities. You don't need as much data. You don't need as much feedback or exploration because So your eval process, should look different.
Because you're seeing the code. Like you see the code is generating, you can tell this is great, this is terrible.
Yeah. And so I think a lot of people had generalized coding agents because coding agents are the first AI product released into the wild. And I think it's a mistake to try to generalize that at large.
The other thing is, engineers have a dog fooding personality. Right? There are plenty of applications where people are trying to build AI in certain domains, and they don't have dog fooding for, like, doctors, for example, are not out there trying to get all the most incorrect advice from AI and be tolerant and receptive to that. So it's very important to keep, I think, these nuanced things in mind.
So what I'm hearing from you, Shreya, interestingly, is that if humans on the team are doing very close data analysis, error analysis, dog fooding it like crazy, and essentially they are the human evals, and you're describing that as that's within the umbrella of evals. So you could do it that way if you have time and motivation to do that, or you could set these things up to be automatic.
Absolutely. It's also about the skills, right? People who work at Anthropic are very, very highly skilled. They've been trained in data analysis or software
I can
engineering
notice.
or AI and whatnot, right?
Yeah.
And, you can get there. Anyone can get there, of course, by, like, learning the concepts, but most people don't have that skill right now.
Dog fooding is a dangerous one, only because a lot of people will say they're dog fooding. They're like, yeah, we dog food it. But are they really? And a lot of people aren't really dog fooding it at that visceral level that you would need to close that feedback loop. So that's the only caveat I would add.
There's also this kind of feels like straw man argument of evals versus A/B tests. Talk about your thoughts there, because that feels like a big part of this debate people are having. Like, do you need evals if you have A/B tests that are testing production level metrics?
So A/B tests are, again, another form of evals, I imagine, right? Like, when you're doing an A/B test, right, you have two different experimental conditions, and then you have a metric that quantifies the success of something, and you're comparing the metric. And again, right, an eval in our mind is systematic measurement of quality, some metric. You can't really do an A/B test without the eval to compare. So maybe we just have a different weird take on it.
Yeah. Okay. So what I'm hearing is, like, you consider A/B tests as part of the suite of evals that you do. I think when people think A/B test, it's like we're changing something in the product. We're going to see if this improves some metric we care about. Is that enough? Why do we need to test every little feature? Like, if it's impacting a metric we care about as a business, we have a bunch of A/B tests that are just constantly running.
This is now a great point. So I think a lot of people prematurely do A/B tests because, they've never done any error analysis in the first place. They just have hypothetically come up with their product requirements, and they, like, believe that, we should test these things. But it turns out, right, when you get into the data, as Hamel showed, that, like, the errors that you're seeing are, like, not what you thought what the errors might be. They were these, like, weird handoff issues, or, like, I don't know, like, the text message thing was strange. So I would say that, like, if you're going to do A/B tests and they're powered by actual error analysis, as we've shown today, then that's great. Go do it. But if you're just going to do them, which we find that people try to do, just trying to do them based on, like, what you hypothetically think is what is important, then I would encourage people to go and, like, rethink that and kind of ground your hypotheses.
Do you have thoughts on what StatSig is going to do at OpenAI? Is there anything there that's interesting? Just like, that was a big deal, a huge acquisition, A/B test company. People are like, oh, A/B test the future. Thoughts?
Just to add to the previous question a little bit is, why is there this debate, A/B testing versus evals? I think fundamentally, evals is people are trying to wrap their head around how to improve their applications. And fundamentally, you need to do data science. Data science is useful in products, like looking at data, doing data analytics. There's many different suite of tools, and you don't need to invent anything new. Sure, you don't need, like, necessarily the whole breadth of data science, and it looks slightly different, just slightly, with LLMs. Your tactics might be different, and so really, what it is like using analytic tools to understand your product. Now, people say the word evals, trying to kind of, like, carve out this new thing and saying, evals and then A/B testing. But if you zoom out, it's the same data science as before. And I think that's what's causing the confusion is, hey, we need data science thinking And AI products just, it's helpful to have that thinking in AI products like it is in any product, is my take on that. So
that's a really good take. Like, I think just the word evals triggers people now.
Yeah.
And if you just call it, we're just doing error analysis, doing data science to understand where our product breaks, and just setting up tests to make sure we know.
That's
I
boring.
think.
Sounds boring. No. We need a mysterious term like evals to really get the momentum going. Your question about
That's right.
StatSig, I think it's very exciting. To be honest, I don't know much about it because, I just imagine that they're this company that there's a tool that many people use, and maybe it just so happened that OpenAI acquired them. I'm sure they've been using them in the past. I'm
they're
sure
customers.
OpenAI's competitors are using StatSig as well. So maybe there is something strategic in that acquisition. I have no idea. I don't know anything there, but I think those are really the bigger questions for me than, is this fundamentally changing A/B testing or making evals more of a priority? I think they've always been a priority. I think OpenAI has always been doing some form of them, and OpenAI has gone so far, like, historically speaking, as to like go and look at all the Twitter sentiment and try to do some sort of retrospective on that, and then tie that back to their products. Like they're doing some amount of evals before they ship their new foundation models, but they're going so much beyond and being like, okay, let's find all the tweets that are complaining about it, all the Reddit threads that are complaining about it, and go try to like figure out what's going on. So it goes to show that like evals are very, very important. No one has really figured it out yet. People are using all the available sources signal that they can to improve their products.
What I will say is I'm really hopeful that it might shift our creative focus within OpenAI, hopefully. Up until now, a lot of the big labs, understandably, have been focused on general benchmarks like MMLU score, human eval, things like that, which are very important for foundation models. And, those are not very related to product-specific evals, like the ones we talked about today, but like handoff and stuff like that. Like those, they tend not to correlate.
They don't
very
correlate
well
with math problem solving. Sorry to say.
Exactly. And so, if you look at the eval products, let's say the ones up until recently that some of the big labs have, they don't have error analysis. They have a suite of generic tools, cosine similarity, hallucination score, whatever, and that doesn't work. It's a good first stab at it. It's okay. At least you're doing something, getting people, maybe it's like getting people to look at data. But eventually what we hope to see is, okay, a bit more data science thinking in this like eval process, which hopefully the tools will get to.
Hamel and I should not be the only two people on the planet that are promoting like a structured way of thinking about application-specific evals. It's like mind-boggling to me. Why are we the only two people doing this? The whole world. What's wrong? So I hope that, we're not the only people and that more people catch on.
Well, the fact that your course on Maven is the #1 highest grossing course on Maven, clearly there's demand and interest, and there's more people, I think, on your side. Interestingly, just an example you've been sharing on Twitter that I think is informative. Everyone's been saying how Claude Code doesn't care about evals, they're all about vibes, and everyone's like, and they're the best coding agent out there, so clearly this is right. More recently, there's all this talk about Codex, OpenAI Codex, being better, and everyone's switching, and they're so pro evals.
I know.
And so
gets me every time. The internet's so inconsistent. My favorite thing was like yesterday, I believe, like a couple of lab mates and I were out getting like dessert or something, and somebody said like, "Oh, do you like Codex or Claude better or whatever?" And the other person said, "Oh, I like Claude." And then someone else said, "But the new version of Codex is better." And then the first person said, "Oh, but the last I checked was 2 days ago, so maybe my thoughts, maybe I'm not up to date." And I was like, my God.
So true.
This is the world we live in. Oh my God. Okay, so I want to ask about just top misconceptions people have with evals and top tips and tricks for being successful. So maybe just share one or two each. So let me just start with misconceptions, and maybe I'll go to Hamel first. Just what are a couple of the most common misconceptions people have with evals still?
The top one is, hey, I can just buy a tool, plug it in, and it'll do the eval for you. Why do I have to worry about this? We live in the age of AI. can't the AI just eval it? That's the most common misconception. And people want that so much that people do sell it, but it doesn't work. So that's the first one.
Shoot. We need humans still. Great. I think that's great news.
The second one that, I see a lot is, hey, just not looking at the data. So in my consulting, people come to me with problems all the time. And the first thing I'll say is, let's go look at your traces. And you can see their eyes pop open and be like, what do you mean? Like, yeah, let's look at it right now. And they're surprised that I'm going to go look at individual traces. And it always 100% of the time, learn a lot and figure out what the problem is. And so I think people just don't know how powerful looking at the data is, like we showed on this podcast.
I would agree with that.
Those are the top two. Okay.
Yes.
Is there anything else, or those are the ones like solve those problems?
Oh, those are definitely. And then I guess the third one I would add is there's no one correct way to do evals. There are many incorrect ways of doing evals, but there are also many correct ways of doing it. And you got to think about where you are at with your product, how much resources you have, and figure out the plan that works best for you. It'll always involve some form of error analysis, as we showed today, but how you operationalize those metrics is going to change based on where you're at.
Amazing. Okay. What are a couple just tips and tricks you want to leave people with as they start on their eval journey or just try to get better at something they're already doing?
So tip number one is just don't be alarmed or don't, be scared of looking at your data. The process, we try to make it as structured as possible. There are inevitably, questions that are going to come up. That's totally fine. You might feel like you're not doing it perfectly. That's also fine. The goal is not to do evals perfectly. It's to actionably improve your product. And we guarantee you, no matter what you do, if you're doing parts of these processes, you're going to find ways of actionable improvement, and then you're going to iterate on your own process from there. The other tip that I would say is we're very pro AI. Use LLMs to help you organize any thoughts that you have throughout this entire process. So this could be everything ranging from like initial product requirements, right? Figure out how to organize them for yourself, figure out how to improve on that product requirements doc based on the open codes that you've created, right? Like don't be afraid to use AI in ways that, present information better for you.
Sweet. So don't be scared. Use LMs as much as you can throughout the process.
But not to replace yourself.
Right. Okay, great. Still jobs. Great. Hamel.
Yeah, let me actually share my screen so when I show something. So to piggyback off what Shreya said is, if you heard any phrase in this podcast, you've probably heard look at your data more than anything else. And so it's so important that we teach that you should create your own tools to make it as easy as possible. So I showed you some tools when we were going through the live example of like how to annotate data. Most of the people I work with, they realize how important this is and they vibe code their own tools. Or we shouldn't say vibe code, they make their own tools. And it's cheaper than ever before because you have AI that can help you, and AI is really good at creating simple web applications that can show you data that have, that can write to a database. It's very simple. And so for the Nurture Boss use case, we wanted to remove all the friction of looking at data. And so what you see here is just some screenshots of what the application that they created looks like. It's just, okay, they have the different channels, voice, email, text. They have the different threads. They hid the system prompt by default. Little quality of life improvements. And then they actually have this axial coding part here where you can see, okay, in red, the count of different errors. They automated that part in a nice way. And they created this within a few hours. And so it's really hard to have a one-size-fits-all thing for looking at your data. You don't have to go here immediately, but something to think about is make it as easy as possible, because again, it's the most powerful activity that you can engage in. It's the highest ROI activity you can engage in. And so, with AI, just remove all the friction.
That's amazing. And again, I think the ROI piece is so important. We haven't even touched on this enough. The goal here is to make your product better, which will make your business more successful. Like, this isn't just a little exercise to catch bugs and things like that. Like, this is the way to make AI products better, because the experience is how users interact with your AI.
Absolutely. If we teach our students, hey, when you're doing these evals, if you see something that's wrong, just go fix it. Like, the whole point is not to have evals, a beautiful eval suite where you can point at it and say, oh, look at my evals. No, just fix your application, make it better. If it's obvious, do it. So totally agree with you.
Amazing. How long, a question I didn't ask, but this is, I think, something people are thinking about. How long do you spend on this? Like, how long does it usually take to do the first time?
I can answer for myself for applications that I work with. Usually I'll spend 3 to 4 days really working with whoever to do initial rounds of error analysis, like a lot of labeling, feel like we're in a good place to create the spreadsheet that Hamel had and everyone's kind of on board and convinced, and even like a few LLM judge evaluators. But this is a one-time cost. Once I figured out how to integrate that in unit tests, or I have like a script that automatically runs it on samples, and I will create a cron job to just do this every week, I would say it's like, I don't know. I find myself probably spending more time looking at data because I'm just data hungry like that. I'm so curious. I'm like, I've gained so much from this process, and it's like put me above and beyond in any of my, collaborations with folks. So I want to keep doing it, but I don't have to. I would say like maybe 30 minutes a week after that.
So it's a week essentially up front, and then like 30 minutes to keep improving on adding to your suite.
Yeah, it's really not that much time. I think people just get overwhelmed by how much time they spend up front and then thinking that they have to keep doing this all the time.
Amazing. Is there anything else that you wanted to share or leave listeners with? Anything else you wanted to kind of double down on as a point before we get to our very exciting lightning round?
So I would say this process is a lot of fun, actually. So it's like, okay, you're looking at data. Oh, it sounds like you're annotating things. Okay. Actually, so I was just looking at a client's data yesterday, the same exact process. It's a application that sends emails, recruiting emails, to try to get candidates to apply for a job. And we decided to start looking at traces. We jumped right into it. Like, hey, let's look at your traces. We looked at a trace. The first thing I saw was this like email that is worded like, given your background, blah, 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 blah. So I asked the person right away, and this is where putting your product hat on and just being critical. And this is where the fun part is. I said, you know what? I hate this email. Like, do you like the email? Given your background? When I receive a message, given your background, comma, I just delete that. So I'm like, what is this? Given your background with machine learning and blah, blah. I'm like, this is a generic thing. Like, so I asked the person like, hey, can we do better than this? Like, this is sounds like generic recruiting. And they're like, oh, yeah, maybe. Yeah, like it's the AI, because they were proud of it. They're like, the AI is doing the right thing, is sending this email with the right information, with the right link, with the right name, everything. And so that's where the fun part is like, put your product hat on and get into like, is this really good?
Something I want to make sure we cover before we get to our very exciting lightning round is this is just scratching the surface of all the things you need to know to do this well. I think this is the best primer I've ever seen on how to do this well.
Nice.
But I think we did it. But you guys teach a course that goes much, much deeper for people that really want to get good at this and take this really seriously. Share what else you teach in the course that we didn't cover, and what else you get as a student being part of the course you teach on Maven.
Yeah, I can talk about the syllabus a little bit, and then Hamel can talk about all the perks. So we go through a life cycle of error analysis, then automated evaluators, then how to improve your application, like how do you create that flywheel for yourself. We also have a few special topics that we find like pretty much no one has ever heard of or taught before, which is exciting. One is how do you build your own interfaces for error analysis. So we kind of go through actual interfaces that we've built, and we also live code them on the spot for new data. And we show kind of how we use Claude Code, Cursor, whatever we're feeling in the moment that day to build these interfaces. And we also talk about kind of broadly cost optimization as well. So a couple of people that I've worked with, they get to a point where their evals are very good, their product is very good, but it's all very expensive because they're using like state-of-the-art models. So how can we kind of replace certain uses of the most expensive GPT-5 models with, 5 nano, 4 mini, whatnot, and save a lot of money, but still maintain the same quality. So we also give some tips for that. Hamel, we also have many perks.
Yeah, talk about the perks.
Okay, the perks. So my favorite perk is there's a 160-page book that's meticulously written that we've created that walks through the entire process in detail of how to do evals that supplement the course. So you don't have to sit there and take all these notes. We've done all the hard work for you, and we have documented it in detail, and organized things. So that is really useful. Another really interesting thing, and something that I got the idea from you, Lenny, is, okay, this is an AI course. Education shouldn't be this thing where you're only watching lectures and doing homework assignments. So students should have access to an AI that also helps them. So what we have done is we've, just like there's the LennyBot that you have.
.com.
Yeah, lennybot.com. We have made the same thing with the same software that you're using. And we have put everything we've ever said about evals into that. So every single lesson, every office hours, every Discord chat, any blogs, papers, anything that we've ever said publicly and within our course, we've put it in there. And we've tested it with a bunch of students, and they've said it's helpful. So we're giving all students 10 months free unlimited access to that alongside the course.
Amazing. And then you'll charge for that later down the road.
I have no idea. I just take 1 month at a time. I don't know what we're doing.
8 months, and then we'll have to figure it out. I was thinking this whole interview should have just been our bots talking to each other.
That's amazing. I would watch that only for like 10 minutes. Then I don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, maybe 30 seconds. Did you guys train it on the voice mode, by the way? That's my favorite feature of Delphi's product. And if not, you should do that.
Oh,
I think I can't remember.
Okay.
I should look at it.
You definitely should. Now that we have this podcast episode, you could use this content to train it. It's 11 labs powered. It's so good. Okay, so how do they get to? I guess that's okay. They get to that once they become they enter your course. So there's no URL
sign up
to
for
go
the
to.
course, and then you'll get a bunch of emails. Everything will be clear, hopefully.
Amazing. Okay,
we also have a
people
Discord of all the students who have ever taken the class, and that Discord is so active. I can't go on vacation without getting notified on the plane.
Bittersweet. Incredible. Okay. With that, we've reached our very exciting lightning round. I've got 5 questions for you. Are you ready?
Yes, let's go.
Let's do it. Okay, so I'm going to bounce between you two. Share something if you want. You can pass if you want. First question, Shreya. What are 2 or 3 books that you find yourself recommending most to other people?
So I like to recommend a fiction book because life is about more than evals. So recently I read Pachinko by Linjun Lee. Really great book. And then I also am currently reading Apple in China, which the name of the author is slipping my mind, but this is kind of more of an exposition written by a journalist on how Apple did a lot of manufacturing processes in Asia over the last several decades. Very eye-opening.
Amazing. Hamel.
Yeah, I have them right here. So I'm the nerd. Okay, so I'm not as cool as Shreya is. So I actually have like textbooks, which are like my favorite. So this one is a very classic one, Machine Learning by Mitchell. Now it's kind of theoretical, but the thing I like about it is it really drives home the fact that Occam's razor is prevalent not only in like science, but also in machine learning and AI. So a lot of times the simplest, and also engineering. So like a lot of times the simpler approach generalizes better. And so that's the thing I kind of internalized deeply from that book. And also really like this one. So another textbook. I told you I'm a nerd. This is like also a very old one.
Wow.
And this is like, Norvig
Yeah.
algorithms. And it's just like, I really like it because it's just human ingenuity. And it's very like lots of clever, useful things
They're down the
in
street.
computing.
I'm at Berkeley.
The people that did that research,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Textbook authors.
super cool. Oh man, nerds, I love it. Okay, next question. Favorite recent movie or TV show? I'll jump to Hamill first.
Okay, so I'm a dad of two parents.
I have two
I don't
parents.
get to, or sorry, two kids. Sorry. So yeah, I'm a dad of two
Exception.
kids. And I don't really get the time to watch any TV or movies. So I watch whatever my kids are watching. So I've watched Frozen like 3 times in the last week.
Only 3. Oh, okay, in the last week. Okay.
So that's my
Okay,
life.
great. That's my Hamill. Frozen. I love it. Okay, Shreya.
Yeah, I don't have kids, so I can give all these amazing answers. Actually, so my husband and I have been watching The Wire recently. We never actually saw it growing up, so we started watching it, and it's great.
I feel like everyone goes through that.
Yeah.
Eventually in their life, they decide, I will watch The Wire. And
I
it's
know,
like
so we are in that
a year
right
of your
now.
life. It's great. It's such a great show. Oh man! But it's so many episodes, and everyone's an hour long. It's
I
such a
know.
commitment.
We get through like 2 or 3 a week, so we're very slow.
Worth it. Okay. Next question. Do you have a favorite product you recently discovered that you really love? And we'll start with Shreya.
Yeah, I really like using Cursor. Honestly, now Claude Code. I'll say why. So I think I'm a researcher more so than anything else. I write papers, I write code, I build systems, everything. And I find that like a tool, I'm so bullish on AI assisted coding because like I have to wear a lot of hats all the time. And now I can be more ambitious with the things that I build and write papers about. So I'm super excited about those. Cursor was my entry point into this, but I'm starting to find myself always trying to keep up with all these AI assisted coding tools.
Hamill.
Yeah, I really like Claude Code, and I like it because I feel like the UX is outstanding. There's a lot of love that went into that. It's just really impressive as a terminal application that is that nice.
How ironic that you two both love Claude Code when it's just built on vibes.
I think it's false. It's not just built on vibes.
There we go. Okay, 2 more questions. Hamill, do you have a favorite life motto that you find yourself using and coming back to in work or in life?
Keep learning and think like a beginner.
Beautiful. Shreya.
I like that. For me, it's to always try to think about the other side's argument. I find myself sometimes just encountering arguments on the internet, like this recent evals debates, and like really think, okay, put myself in their shoes. There's probably a generous take, generous interpretation, and I think we're all much stronger together than if we start picking fights. My vision for evals is not that Hamill and I become billionaires. It is that everyone can build AI products, and we're all on the same page.
/ everyone becomes billionaires.
Yes.
Yes.
Amazing. Final question. When I have 2 guests on, I always like to ask this question, and I'll start with Hamill. What's something about Shreya that you like most? What do you like most about Shreya? And I'm going to ask her the same question in reverse.
Yeah. Shreya is one of the wisest people that I know, especially for being so young relative to me. I feel like she's like much wiser than I am, honestly, seriously. She's very grounded and has like a very even perspective on things. And so I'm just really impressed by that all the time.
Shreya.
Yeah, my favorite thing about Hamill is his energy. I don't know anybody who consistently maintains momentum and energy like Hamill does. I often think that like I would start caring much less about evals if not for Hamill. And everyone needs a Hamill in their life, for sure.
Oh. Well, we all have a Hamill in our life now. This was incredible. This was everything I'd hoped it'd be. I feel like this was the most interesting, in-depth, consumable primer on evals that I've ever seen. I'm really thankful you two made time for this. 2 final questions. Where can folks find you? Where can they find the course? And how can listeners be useful to you? I'll start with Shreya.
Yeah, you can reach me via email. It's on my website. If you Google my name, that is the easiest way to get to my website. You can find the course if you Google AI evals for engineers and product managers, or just AI evals course. You'll find it. We'll send some links, hopefully, after this, so it's easy. And how to be helpful? Two things always for me. One is ask me questions when you have them. I will try to get to them, respond as soon as I can. The other one is tell us your successes. One of the things that keeps us going is somebody tells us like what they implemented or what they did, a real case study. And Hamel and I get so excited from these. And it really keeps us going. So please share.
Yeah, it's pretty easy to find me. My website is hamel.dev. I'll give you the link. You can find me on social media, LinkedIn, Twitter. Thing that's most helpful is to echo what Shreya said. We would be delighted if we're not the only people teaching evals. We would love other people to teach evals. And so any kind of blog posts, writing, especially that as you go through this and learn this, that you want to share, we would be delighted to help reshare that or amplify that.
Amazing. Very generous. Thank you two so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And you guys have a lot going on. So thank you.
Thanks, Lenny, for having us and for all the compliments.
My pleasure. Bye, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. If you found this valuable, you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Also, please consider giving us a rating or leaving a review, as that really helps other listeners find the podcast. You can find all past episodes or learn more about the show at lennyspodcast.com. See you in the next episode.
This design process that designers have been taught, we sort of treat it as gospel. That's basically dead. You as a designer actually do not have the time to make these beautiful mocks anymore.
A big part of the design role now is helping engineers and teams execute, not just telling them, here's the design.
A few years ago, 60 to 70% of it was mocking and prototyping. But now I feel the mocking up part of it is 30 to 40%.
You're better off not blocking that, letting them cook.
It's not just designers who are feeling like, oh yeah, we have to keep up with engineers. I think even engineers are like, how do we keep up with ourselves?
How to keep up with all our agents, our 7 agents we're constantly running.
The result of engineering changing a bunch is that design is sort of forced to change. We used to go off and make this 2-year, 5-year, 10-year vision even. Now it becomes a vision that's 3 to 6 months out and isn't necessarily creating this beautiful deck. It's sometimes just creating a prototype that points people in the right direction.
Boris on the podcast recently was saying Claude Code is now helping him come up with ideas.
We'll get better at taste and judgment and design. We might be holding on to that a little bit too much.
Where will human brains continue to be valuable?
At the end of the day, someone has to decide what is actually going to get built and what actually matters. Someone still needs to be accountable for the decision. What do you now look for when you're hiring designers? There's probably 3 archetypes of folks that are really interesting to me right now.
Today's guest is Jenny Wen. Jenny was head of design for Claude, is now leading design for Claude Cowork. Prior to that, she was director of design at Figma, where she led the design teams behind FigJam and Slides. She was also a designer at Dropbox and Square and Shopify. And what I love about this conversation is that Jenny is living in the future of where design as a profession is heading, and she's here to give us a glimpse into what that looks like and how much things are going to be changing for designers. It is pretty wild and extremely interesting. A huge thank you to Noah 11 and Emily Lynn Hasham for suggesting topics and questions for this conversation. Don't forget to check out lennysproductpass.com for an incredible set of deals available exclusively to Lenny's newsletter subscribers. Let's get into it after a short word from our wonderful sponsors. This episode is brought to you by Mercury, radically different banking loved by over 300,000 entrepreneurs, including me. I switched to Mercury from Chase over a year ago, and it is such a profoundly better experience. It's like an actual product person built a bank versus a banking person building a product. It is fast, it's elegant, it is super easy to set wires, to track my spending, to set up triggers to move money around when accounts get low. We moved all of our invoicing to Mercury, and it is such a smoother experience than anything else we've tried. It's also really easy to grant people on your team just the right amount of access to help take work off your plate. It's free to get started, no in-person visits, no minimum balances. The product also flexes to all sizes of company, from startups to large enterprises. Just visit mercury.com to learn more and apply online in minutes. Mercury is a fintech company, not an FDIC-insured bank. Banking services provided through Choice Financial Group and Column NA members FDIC. This episode is brought to you by Orcus, the company behind open source Conductor, the orchestration platform powering modern enterprise applications. Modern systems are built on microservices, APIs, and event-driven architectures, but legacy automation tools can't keep up. Siloed low-code platforms, outdated process management, and disconnected API tooling break down under real-world scale and constant change. Orcus Conductor provides a production-grade orchestration layer for coordinating microservices, APIs, data pipelines, human tasks, and agentic workflows with deterministic control flow, retries, observability, and governance. Built for enterprise scale, Orcus supports visual and code-first development with built-in compliance and reliability. Through a built-in MCP gateway, AI agents handle reasoning and decision-making while safely accessing existing APIs and internal systems as MCP tools. This enables agents to operate across enterprise environments and scale from demos to production, orchestrating systems, agents, and humans together to deliver smarter outcomes faster. Learn more at orcus.io/Lenny. That's orkes.io/Lenny. Jenny, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, excited to be here.
I've been looking forward to this conversation because I spent a lot of time on this podcast talking about the future of software engineering, how much that role is changing, the role of product management, how much that role is changing. I've been spent a lot of time on how design is changing. Clearly, it is also changing in a really big way. And you have such a front row seat to where things are heading. I also know you have a lot of very strong opinions about where things are heading. So there's a lot of stuff I want to talk about. I want to just start with this broad question. How is the design process changing with the rise of AI?
It's changing a lot. I think it's still also got a long way to go in terms of the way it's changing. Like, I think we've actually seen, engineering change a lot more in the past little while than design actually has. But I think the result of engineering changing a bunch is that design is sort of forced to change. And so I think some context around this is I did a talk at a conference in Berlin a few months ago in September, and I called it Don't Trust the Design Process, where I basically just said hey, this design process that designers have been taught where you go off and you do a bunch of research and discovery, and then you diverge, you converge, diverge, converge. And it's this process that we sort of treated as gospel and tried so hard to preserve. And we were trust the process. That's basically dead. I think it was sort of dying before the age of AI. But given now that, engineers can go off and spin off their 7 quads, I think as designers, we really have to let go of that process. And I think that's the big thing that's changing. But I think even in the past 3 to 4 months since I did that talk actually starts to feel it kind of feels outdated to me, which is a little embarrassing. But especially with the big shift of Opus 4.6 and a bunch of folks just really discovering and using Claude Code over the holiday break, I think we're seeing this force to change our process happen even more. The way I sort of see it now is there are basically 2 types of design work, and design work is kind of becoming really stratified in this new world. So there's the first one, which is really just supporting the implementation and execution. So this is the one where engineers are using their 7 quads to create all these features, and anybody can put an idea out there, and you can just talk about an idea, and somebody, usually actually an engineer, because they're still better at implementing this stuff than we are, they will just make a scrappy version of it and you can try it out. And you as a designer actually do not have the time to make these beautiful mocks anymore, or to kind of lead in this way. And then I think there's the second kind of work that feels also really important, which is creating the sort of vision or direction for things. This one feels the hardest to make time for, and it's one that we still did before. But I think the shape of it's very much changing, because I think we used to go off and say, we're going to do this design vision. We're going to go off and make this 2-year, 5-year, whatever, 10-year vision even. And we're going to point us towards something. But the way that the technology is changing now, we actually don't know. We don't know what's going to happen in 2 years. There's too much changing. And it usually becomes a vision that's 3 to 6 months out. and isn't necessarily something that is like creating this like beautiful deck that's like beautifully story told. It's sometimes just like creating a prototype that points people in the right direction. And I think this kind of work is like still really important in this world, because in a world where people can spin off their seven clods, make whatever features they want in any kind of like direction or in implementation, you need to point them towards something. And in order to make sure that we're all making something that makes sense together and is also done in a way where it's like efficient, right? Like if we're all working towards something that has one greater cause, it's like much more efficient to do that than just random things. So that's like the big shift that I'm seeing. And I think I have opinions about it now, but ask me in like 3 months and it might actually change even more.
So what you're saying here is it's not like you or the design field is like, we need to change. It's engineering, and the fact that you can build so quickly just forces the role of a designer to change, because as you said, engineers can just ship. And what you're finding here is like, you're better off not blocking that, letting them cook, as they say. And then there's kind of this mode of helping them along as they ship, bring it together, make sure it all kind of connects, guide them a little bit.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I don't think there is like one unifying voice that's like, designers, we need to change right now. But there is sort of like the follow-on effects of engineering tooling really changing. I think we'll probably see design tooling change in this next year or so as well. But a lot of it right now is trailing that. And I think it's also really empowering for us too, because as designers, we also now have access to a lot of these coding tools, and we can be a part of the process in a way where we're implementing stuff. Like it's like I'm doing a lot of last mile stuff where I'm implementing all the polish and like and sort of like working with engineers really closely to get the feature across the line, and also prototype stuff in actual code as opposed to like relying on engineers to do that again.
How true do you think this is at all companies, at say AI companies, non-AI companies? You know, someone may be hearing this, okay, Anthropic, Claude, like, okay, it's like they're at the bleeding edge for one. Two, it's like developer-y a little bit. But I think people might be feeling like, okay, this is not going to happen at Salesforce. This is not going to happen at, I don't know, ServiceNow, wherever. So I guess, do you feel like this is where all teams are heading? Is it mostly AI, bleeding edge companies? How widespread do you think the design process shift is going to be?
So the talk that I did last year has weirdly been like the most resonant talk that I've done. And I think it's something that people are starting to feel across the industry, where they're like, oh yeah, we can't do the old design process anymore. You know, we are using tools like Claude Code and B0 and whatnot to start to spin up prototypes, and PMs are starting to spin up prototypes and stuff like that as well. So I think there's something there emerging. But the other interesting observation with that talk too was there was actually also a decent amount of like backlash. Like people clearly have invested their entire careers in learning, teaching, using this like really stable design process. And I think there was a lot of like discrediting, like, oh yeah, like we can't do without discovery. We can't do without these pieces of the process. So I think there is still a piece of the industry that is not quite there yet in terms of this way of working, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a big part of this is like, you could argue, like the question is what leads to the best, most successful products and companies? And you could argue it's spending time doing discovery, user research, mocks, iterating, beta testing, or it could be just engineer ship stuff that's okay, not amazing, good enough. We learn, iterate, build, iterate. Is your sense that that second path is, not only is that just like what everyone's doing, but that actually leads to the better product at this point?
I think you sort of have to choose and use your discretion as to like when to actually ship something. But I think the ability to execute, try something out and try it with like real data and a real user's like kind of mindset in the product, I think that does lead to a better product, especially as we're all working with these like new developing AI models that are non-deterministic. You can't mock up all the states, you know, and you can't theorize, and you can't even make like a clickable prototype with it. You sort of have to use the actual models underneath, and you have to sort of see people try it out with their use cases, because with these models, like you can design them for different use cases, but you actually discover use cases as you see people using them. So yes.
The other thing I always hear, and building on what you just said, is just, you don't know what people will do with AI. You don't know how good it'll be at certain things, the non-deterministic piece of it. So you can create these amazing mocks of what it might be, and then people use it in a completely different way, which is where Cowork came from, and probably even Claude Code at the beginning. And so what's it just like to be a designer at Anthropic? Just like give us a day in the life of working at Anthropic at the center of the storm.
A good amount of time at Anthropic is actually just like catching up on what's happening at the company. I think this is the company where I've worked at a few other companies around this size where I think there's just a lot of like information and a lot of things going on, but I feel really compelled to keep up with it. Like there's stuff that is like model developments on the research side. And then at any given time, there are just so many different teams prototyping and trying different ideas out. And there's a bunch of different like code names and stuff like that. And a lot of time I'm just like trying to navigate and figure out what those projects are, because I think I'm just trying to spot and see like, hey, what's coming up ahead for me? Because there's stuff from both the research team, but also some of our like labs teams that are closer to research and trying out and prototyping stuff. And then there's just like stuff I want to try out. Like we have a bunch of prototypes and products internally that we can use. And I am just curious and I want to try those things out. And then I think there's also a lot of folks who internally have a lot of insights and opinions on where the industry is going. And some of those are just like really interesting to read, because a lot of these are like philosophical debates or directions of the company and stuff like that. And yeah, I feel like I just want to keep up with these things. Whereas I think in a normal company, I'm like, it's fine. This is stuff that's happening outside of my reach. I don't really care as much. Where here, I think that it's both the volume and the kinds of things that are happening that I'm like really interested in keeping up with. And then aside from that sort of keep up, that's not a huge part of my job, but I do think it's a really interesting part of it.
Well, it connects to the point you made earlier, or a big part of the design role now is helping engineers and teams execute, not just telling them, here's the mock, here's the design. It's helping them stay on track, helping them connect ideas, create a cohesive experience as it's happening. So that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think part of it is just curiosity. Like it feels like I have this front row seat to so much that's happening in the industry. And so a lot of it is like, our Slack is a gold mine. Like I'm just excited to read through the things that people are working on and they're saying.
I never thought about how like there's already so much AI news to keep track of as a regular person, and then actually seeing what's actually happening inside a lab is a whole new set of feeds to watch.
Yeah. It's like I think that is the best AI news is probably internally if you're ever at one of these companies in the Slack.
Damn. Yeah. It's just problem keeps getting harder. Just keeping track of what's going on. Okay, so that's part of the job. What else?
There is still some of like the traditional like, let me think about what's happening in the future and let me like make some designs for that. That's something that, for example, this week I've allotted some time to where I'm like, okay, cool. Like we have been in a lot of like execution mode for Cowork, and now I want to set aside some time to think about, hey, what does the next like 3 months look like, and where could that actually go given where the market's at, where the models are at, and what could that be? Because I think it still really helps to visualize that and show that to the team and point everyone in the same direction. And then I also spend a bunch of my day just jamming on stuff with engineers. Like a lot of it is just a conversation or like whiteboarding or going through something that they built and giving them feedback on it and being a designer in that kind of way where we're like consulting. And then I spend a part of my day in code, like polishing, implementing stuff. Sometimes what happens is an engineer and I have worked through something and they've implemented a first version of it, and I just go in and polish it with them. And that's a really fun part of my job that I think didn't exist as much a few months ago.
Are you still doing elements of the traditional design process? Prototyping, user research, panels, I don't know, just like going out and in, like the whole thing you described.
Yeah, I think we're still doing all of that to some extent. Like we have a user researcher on the team who is putting together both like traditional studies as well as surveys, and the whole team is reading those studies and that feedback. We are still prototyping stuff. I'm still mocking stuff up. I think it's just I have a wider set of tools now, and I think the proportion of time I spend doing each thing just has changed.
Got it. Okay. So that's a really interesting takeaway. It used to be that was a huge, like, I guess, what would be the pie chart of what your life was before, where it's like traditional thinking, planning, prototyping, mocking, research, and then just like feedback and execution, and now today?
Yeah, I think as a designer a few years ago, I would say like maybe 60 to 70% of it was like mocking and prototyping stuff up. And then spending, the last 20 or so, some of the last 20 or so, like doing the sort of like jamming with engineers, consulting with them, and the last like 10% maybe doing, coordination meetings, etc. But now I feel like the mocking up part of it is like 30 to 40%. And then there's that other 30 to 40% there that is now jamming and pairing directly with engineers. And then there's like a slice, I don't know how much I have left, but like there's a slice of it that is now like implementation as well. Yeah.
Like actually building and shipping.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. So kind of following that thread, what's in your AI stack? What do you, as a designer, I know you're a manager, and I want to talk about how you actually are IC also. What's in your AI stack? What tools are you using in your role?
What is in my AI stack? Well, we're going to Anthropic, so we're going deep on the Claude stack.
Yeah.
I'm using obviously like chats, Claude Chat, but increasingly more and more Claude Cowork. I've basically shifted all of my chat use cases over to Cowork because I've been finding that, it sort of is better at these longer running tasks. And most of the things I was asking Claude for are these longer running tasks. And then there's Claude Code, of course. I use it mostly with VS Code in the IDE because I'm usually tweaking front end stuff, and it helps to just like be able to see the code and then talk to Claude as well. I've been trying to actually use Claude Code more remotely, like through both mobile and through Slack as well. It's really fun for somebody to say like, oh yeah, this one icon's off or something, and you just mention Claude, and Claude does it, and then you pick up the PR and it's done. That's been really, really fun too. And yeah, I think I think we're a fully Claude house here. So yes, that's basically my stack.
Are you still using Figma as a designer?
I am still using Figma.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I was waiting to hear. Okay.
Yes.
So Figma is still part of your life. Being a former Figmate, is that what you all were called?
Yeah. Figmates.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I know there's this big debate on Twitter, just like, is code the future of design? Do we need Figma anymore? Do we need a design? What's your sense? Figma still important?
I mean, as a former Figmate, I maybe I'm biased in that way, but I think there is still, like, when I use Figma, I'm like, yes, this is what I should be using, and it still fills a very good gap for me. I think a lot of that is actually just like, one is exploring a lot of different options. I think that's a really important part of the design process, to be able to just think about like 8 to 10 different ways to do something. I think the best design happens when you're able to just like throw a bunch of ideas at the wall and curate and just like and push yourself to come up with a bunch of these different directions. Right now, coding or right now working with some of these coding tools doesn't lend itself super well to that, because it's super linear. You get super invested in one direction and you just iterate with Claude on them, for example. So Figma has been really great at just like exploring all these different options, and I think it's still going to exist that way to some extent. And then I think there's like really fine sort of visual and interaction details that are also really great to be able to just try out in Figma. Again, it's a lot of different directions, but it's micro directions. It's being able to think about like different typography or styles, having those in a canvas where you can just explore that specifically is still so helpful, and is not something that I always want to like go directly to code in.
It's interesting you still use an IDE, because in engineering, it's clearly shifting to command lines, agents. IDEs are kind of moving to not be cool anymore. So and it makes a lot of sense. You just want to edit some CSS things, some like color stuff. And so I could see why not just telling the agent, hey, just come on, change this one hex value. Just changing it is so much easier.
Yeah, it's really annoying to be like, can you change this to this class, when you can just go in and change it to a different class.
So that's interesting. I wonder if IDEs now become useful for designers and PMs, and engineers have moved on.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Okay, so a lot of your time you spend working with engineers, giving them feedback, kind of nudging them in the right direction. There's a sense, I feel, of just like your advice is like, let go. Don't feel like you need to be this gatekeeper. But there's this piece of, okay, help them move in a direction that is cohesive and is creating products we're proud of. a lot of designers, I think, are in this boat right now. Just like, oh my God, I can't keep up with all these engineers shipping stuff all day. What's something you learned about just either how to help your engineers get better at design so that it just ends up being better, or just kind of keeping on top of this and not going crazy?
Whenever I do work with engineers on projects and it's more on like a consulting basis, I do just try to explain, why I'm thinking a way that I'm thinking to help them like extract principles, as opposed to me just being like, no, I don't think this should go here. It's like, no, I think we should have a button here because not everybody realizes you can prompt this. And here's an example where it comes from research and whatnot. So I also just like try to point engineers to our design system and stuff like that in code, because right now Claude is like writing a lot of the code and it's like not always like picking up stuff in the design system and whatnot. So as much as I can sort of equip them with stuff that they can use in the future without me, that's helpful. And then on your point of trying not to go crazy, I think it's hard. I think it's really hard right now. And I see this a lot from actually like both engineers and designers, where it's like now that we're sort of capable of doing so much, we want to do more. And so I think it's not just designers who are feeling like, oh yeah, we have to keep up with engineers. I think even engineers are like, how do we keep up with ourselves right now? So that's something I'm hearing a lot.
That's so true.
Yeah.
Oh man, how to keep up with all our agents, our 7 agents we're constantly running.
Yeah.
Okay, so then as a designer, where in this profession, craft and great experience and quality and trust are such a core part of the job to help instill that in the products, because that in theory leads to really successful products and companies. How do you just think about maintaining craft, quality, trust as your products are just shipping 1,000 times a day and you're not able to stay on top of them and there's no designer involved?
It's not that there's no designer involved. It's more just like it's almost like there's too much for one designer to handle. But I think with this, I think about where the features or products are, that like where they are sort of in the cycle of adoption versus like kind of early preview. So for example, like we sometimes will launch things and we will say, hey, this is a research preview. It's early, it's gonna have a bunch of these flaws, and we caveat that a bunch. I think Claude Cowork is actually a good example of this, where we labeled it a research preview and we put it out there knowing that, hey, this is like similar to our models, this is the worst it's ever gonna be, but we're gonna put it out there because we believe, internally we've tried it a bunch, and there's something really powerful here that some people will benefit from. It might not yet be the easiest to work with. It might not be the highest quality. It might have some issues with it, but we're going to put it out there because we believe the benefits outweigh the cons. I think that is like okay to do, especially when there is something like really valuable with the product already and it's worth putting it out there. But I think the promise you sort of have to make your users is like, hey, we're going to put it out there, but we're going to iterate. We're going to take your feedback and we're going to iterate and we're going to make it better. And you have to sort of commit that. You have to show that to the world. You have to respond to people's feedback, and you have to show that you are continuously shipping and improving it. Because I think the way that you really lose trust around quality and releasing something early is if you release it early and then nothing ever happens. That is something that degrades a brand. But whenever you put something out early, like it's possible to do that and like maintain the brand of your company. And I think that's something that we've been doing pretty well. And I think if there's anything anyone's listening can take away from it, is like, yeah, we're continuing to do that. And I think that is actually really fun for me as a designer, because you put something out there and you actually learn and you get feedback about it immediately and you know what to do next.
The way I've heard you describe this is building trust through speed.
Yeah, for sure. It's building trust through speed, but also just like making people feel like they've been heard and that we're fixing things based on what they're trying to use it for, and their feedback is actually appreciated and used.
Yeah, it's clear when the labs launch stuff, and y'all are very good at this, everyone on the team is tweeting and just like responding to tweets and comments and then shipping, hey, we fixed this yesterday and this is happening. So there's a clear sense of this is just today, and we know this is broken and we will fix it. And then because Claude Code can code very quickly, the fixes come very fast. Okay, so another big question that people are asking, that I ask a lot on this podcast, is around just like what skills become valuable. And like another way I've been thinking about it, Lex put it this way recently, is where will human brains continue to be valuable as AI gets smarter? So we've gone through this progression of tab completing segments of code to 100% of code is written by AI now. Like, it's crazy. To now AI is reviewing its own code. Boris on the podcast recently was saying Claude Code is now helping him come up with ideas and decide what to build, which is like, okay, wow, look at that. Look at it go. The whole product workflows, the product development process slowly get eaten up by AI. So the question is just like, where will human brains still be useful, at least until we have super intelligence? Do you think AI is going to get very, very good at taste, judgment, design?
I think it will get better at taste and judgment and design. Yeah, like I think we might be holding on to that a little bit too much and saying like, oh yeah, like, you know, a designer or somebody will always know the best thing to ship or the best version of this. But I do think AI's sense of taste will get better. At the end of the day, someone has to decide like what is actually going to get built and what actually matters. And when I think about people saying like, oh, you know, like AI is just going to build this software for us, a lot of the hard parts of building software are actually like not building it, you know? If you think about the hardest times that you've had at work, Lenny, it's probably things like, oh, you and some other person like disagreeing about like what should go into this feature or what shouldn't go into this feature. And those things still feel like, yes, AI can weigh in, but it can't necessarily solve this dispute between you and somebody else. And so there is something about like deciding what actually goes into the things we build, which I guess is taste in some way, but maybe not taste in like the way we think about like aesthetic taste or whatnot. There's some sort of like, it's like judgment around what to do next.
Just watching how quickly AI had took over coding, which I think a year ago, definitely 2 years ago, most people are like, I don't think so. I don't think AI will get this good, and that the best engineers in the world trust it so much. They're not even looking at the code anymore. Like, that's where we got. It just made me reevaluate all these assumptions I've had about, okay, AI will never be as good as really good PMs, designers at judging what is great and deciding what to build. But I'm just like starting to think, I think it will get there. Like, even an example you shared, like it could give these two people trying to make a decision, here's all of the data you need to make a decision, and here's why this is the right answer, and just press yes, press 1, and I'll go ahead and build it.
Yeah.
So I think we're just, to your point, I think we undervalue just how good it'll get at this stuff. Okay, so your sense is it'll get better, but your sense is we'll still need awesome designers to be involved, awesome PMs to help make these decisions, engineers, of course.
Yeah. I think someone will still have to decide like, oh, we want to build this kind of product. Or like, given what the AI is presenting us, like someone still needs to be accountable for the decision. You know, the same way that like, even though Claude can write all this code for you today, it is still an engineer who's accountable for like, does that code actually work? Does this actually make sense in the product? So I think there's that like decision-making / judgment layer, which feels like maybe one day we won't have to do that, but it still falls on us. Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. It makes me think about the radiology example where there's always the sense that AI is going to take over that field of radiology and tell you what is going on.
Mm-hmm.
But like the human is mostly useful for signing off on the decision because someone needs to be liable if they're wrong, which isn't the best job in the world. But that's a different game, is health versus code.
Yeah.
Okay, another ongoing question in AI and design is just like, it feels like chatbots and terminals are just like I don't think anyone expected this to be the lasting user interface to AI. Like chatbots, okay, no, this is just like a temporary stop along the journey. But now it's like gone even further in just terminals. Do you have thoughts on just, I don't know, where, do you think there will be a next step of how we interface with AI, or do you think chatbots and terminals are mostly where we end up?
There will likely be a combination of both, like both UIs and interfaces that you are interacting with, clicking with, and that feel like more tactile. We are already seeing this and playing with this within Claude, like the chat bot. So we recently released a bunch of these widgets that let Claude sort of elicit and ask you questions and also show you, things like the weather and stocks and whatnot in interactive ways. And I think those have had a really good reception because people still like to see UIs and touch them and click them, and they are much more efficient than, typing something to Claude. But at the same time, when we really leaned into this like chatbot paradigm, like I think that it just gave us this whole world of flexibility that we didn't get with these sort of like baked in UIs. So my read here is like, I don't think chat is ever going away, because this opened up this like new way of like infinite ways to work with the model and to sort of like talk to the computer that we just didn't have before. But I think that it will still be most direct for very specific things to exist in this UI. And I think that what will probably happen here is that a lot of those UIs will be generated more and more often by the models, as opposed to something that we're like hand coding each instance. But I think we're in this space where I don't think chat and maybe even like talking to the terminal is going to go away.
It's interesting that like with OpenClaw, Claude, Modplot, all the names, one of the big innovations is like another way to chat with it through WhatsApp and Telegram and SMS, just like another form of chatbot. But that was a big unlock. Oh, I could just chat with it through WhatsApp.
Yeah. And it's like chatting and talking to someone is still like, we as humans are doing it. And it's a way for us to interact in a really rich way. And now we just have this other medium to like interact with a computer, basically.
Yeah. So Kevin Wheel, who works at another AI lab I won't mention, he had this great point on the podcast that talking is such a beautiful way to handle every level of intelligence. We can talk to people that are very, very smart and not so smart, and it's talking. And it scales so well across the spectrum. We can talk to people at 200 IQ, 300, like it's talking still works. So that's why it's been this beautiful way to deal with the growing intelligence of models as it continues to work.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Yeah.
This episode is brought to you by Omni. Many product teams today are in the process of debating how to ship AI analytics. The hard part is obvious. Having an LLM guess at SQL in production is a huge mess and just a bad idea. Omni takes a different approach. They have a semantic layer built in so that when you embed their analytics, the AI actually knows your business definitions, not just your raw tables. You can test queries, validate the reasoning, and lock down permissions before anything hits production. If you want AI analytics in your product without building the whole stack from scratch, check out omni.co/Lenny for a free 3-week trial. Companies like Perplexity, DBT, and BuzzFeed use Omni to ship analytics their customers can trust. That's omni.co/Lenny. Okay, I want to come back to this whole idea of management and IC. So you've kind of put yourself back into the IC role in a lot of ways. Talk about that, and if you think that's just like a thing design managers need to be doing.
Yeah, I have takes on this. So this past year at Anthropic, I joined as an IC at first, and then I managed a team for a few months in like an org structure that sort of needed it, and now I'm actually back to doing full-time IC work. And I joined Anthropic as an IC because I was just really excited about the kind of work that there was to be done as an IC here, but also because I was feeling like, I sort of want to be close to the work, and I think this feels like a really important time to do it before I like ascend the corporate ranks, and I was having these like questions and doubts about like, is middle management like, is that safe in the future? Like, is the way that we're working actually, is this going to be a job that persists into the future, or should I, try something else and like get my hands dirty kind of thing? And to be totally fair, like I actually love both sides of the coin. Like I love managing people. I love like setting up teams, and being at that level. But I also just really love IC work. Like I was sort of like a reluctant manager when I did it, and I was like, oh, okay, I'll do it. So I love both sides of the coin like pretty equally. But I think actually what being an IC across this past year has taught me is that it actually just like gave me a lot of skills that I don't think I would have gained if I was just managing throughout this year. Like the design, like I mentioned, the design process has changed so much in this past year, and I feel like I've just picked up so many hard skills that I wouldn't have necessarily had the time to do if I was just managing a team. So that's actually the best thing it's afforded me, and I think at any point if I'm like managing a team again, I think it will give me the empathy and understanding of how the design process has changed. And I think that's actually a really important thing right now because, yeah, the teams are working so differently. And I think it's actually pretty hard to empathize if you are not working in that way or you're like not always like testing all the tools and trying stuff. But yeah, like it's an interesting time to be a designer. And if I had not worked in this environment, I don't know if I would have totally understood it or like knew what to do or how to guide my teams. So that's sort of what this year really gave me.
And so you were previously a director of design at Figma, right? How
Yep.
big was your team? Like how large was your org, just to give people a reference?
At the max, I probably had, I think, 12, 15 designers or so, and I had a few managers as well. So
Cool. And then you
it
went
was like
back
an
to
org.
IC.
Yeah.
Okay. So you had the sense that middle management might not last. What's your current feeling? Do you think design management is a thing that persists long term, or do you think everyone turns into IC?
I think as long as there is a team of people, it helps to have somebody who is managing a team. Like I think there's like real value in managers. It depends kind of like what the shape of the manager is and what they actually do. But the way I think about like what a helpful manager is these days is somebody who is not just like, I think, pure people management, like, oh, like just somebody to sort of set you up, help you in your career, have one-on-ones, make sure you're feeling like good at work. I think that is kind of not a thing as much anymore. But I think somebody who can really function as like giving the team direction as well as doing some of the people management stuff, like that tied together, I think is the future of what managing looks like, at least for now. Like somebody who can really engage with the team in terms of like the work and giving direction there, as well as like creating the environment for them to do their best work.
And do you see yourself going back into management long term?
I probably will. Like I think I really just love, helping a team like build the best product possible. And my motto there is like whatever it takes, if it's somebody that's if the team needs somebody to give the team direction and like set up the team and whatnot, that could be me. If the team just like needs somebody to execute on it, that could be me as well.
So the advice I'm hearing for people in design that are especially managers is you almost need to move back into IC in order to truly understand what is happening and how much it's changing so that you can be a better manager.
I think so. And I think traditionally, at least what I've seen, a lot of like the engineering disciplines, like when they hire EMs or even sometimes like directors there, they actually make the EMs like take a rotation for a few months and pick up a few tasks and really understand how the technology works before they become a full-time manager. And I think design probably needs to do something similar too, where I think in the past design has been much more like people management oriented.
What did you find yourself most rusty in when you went back to IC designer?
Actually like doing crits, and just
Getting
realizing
criticized.
Yeah, getting criticized. You're like, oh yeah, like it is hard to get critical feedback and to hear it on such a regular basis, because that's the thing you have to do as a designer is like it's a pretty vulnerable exercise to share work and present it with your team, and then also just get a lot of critical feedback and take that all the time. Yeah.
So currently you're leading design / IC designing on Cowork. Is that right?
Yeah.
Awesome. So Boris, he was on the pod recently, talked about how there's like a lot of debate about what Cowork should be, and there's all these big ideas. And he's like, in the end, let's just make it like a terminal basically in the product and just kind of a fancy terminal. Is there anything you could share about just the process of landing on where you landed for that experience of Cowork? I have it here on my monitor, by the way, looking at it.
With Cowork specifically, we have had a bunch of different prototypes internally of what that could look like. And it's one of those things where we tried a lot of things, and then I think we weren't really sure like when it was actually going to be ready to ship. And then it's sort of like everything all at once. Like we were like, okay, we're gonna ship it soon.
It was 10 days, 10 days of building.
Yeah, it was definitely longer than that. Like overall, it was like 10 days to get it from what we had internally to something that we were ready to ship externally. So we'd been building it for a while, but we weren't really sure about like the actual form it was going to take. And so the way it got there is actually there was a lot of different other explorations that we had internally on top of different agent harnesses and whatnot. And we just had prototyped little parts of the different interactions that ended up in Cowork. So things like when Claude gives you a to-do list, we tried a bunch of different form factors for that. We tried a bunch of different form factors for the way it presents you different like multiple choice questions. We tried a bunch of different ways to teach people what the use cases are and whatnot. And I don't know if we like landed on the best form factor ever, but essentially it was like stuff that was sort of already working internally that people liked, that we just thought we were going to get some more signal on by releasing it. So I think forcing ourselves to release it within that 10 days that we did, it was just sort of like, whatever we had, let's put it out there, and then let's go out there and iterate from there, which is what we're doing.
And it blew up the internet when you launched it, so it worked out.
Yeah.
Is there a feature of Cowork today that you're either most proud of or just like can't wait to fix and improve?
Honestly, I think I'm just most proud of us actually just like shipping it, to be honest, and putting it out there. And yeah, I don't know if there's like one specific thing yet, because like I think when you work on something and you work on it so long, especially as a designer, you're like, I don't know if I like, all I can do is see flaws in it. But I think there's a lot of stuff that I'm excited about. Like we have been iterating, especially on the homepage, and to make that something where it feels more like, hey, these are like tasks you can give Claude, and the tasks that Claude are working on. And so that actually should be rolling out. It might already be rolled out by the time this
I see like this little randomizer thing where you click it and it gives you all these different ideas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then so when you actually start to work with Claude on stuff, it feels more like a to-do list. Like it feels more like these are things Claude's working on. These are things that Claude needs your attention on. And I think there's an opportunity here to make it feel much more like this like shared to-do list between you and Claude. So excited to iterate on that. And then I'm also excited to think more about, like what is the actual true form factor of this? Like, is it stuck in the screen always? Or how does this sort of like reach out to the different surfaces that it's working with?
I love that you shared that it wasn't just 10 days to do this thing. There's like these numbers that people throw out there. We build it in 10 days. And your point is like there was time spent thinking about what direction it should go and prototyping, mocking, trying stuff. And then it's like, okay, now we know what we want it to be. Let's build it and ship it.
Yeah, I think for some reason that became like the viral thing that got taken away from all of the sort of Cowork announcements, is that it only took 10 days. But I think there have just been so many different explorations and people that have worked on different pieces of Cowork that, yeah, it was not just 10 days. And there's a lot of different people involved. It's one of those things where it's like the idea kept coming back and it's like never the right moment, or there's like different variations of it, and then all of a sudden it's the right moment and it feels like, oh, so obvious all along, but there was a long journey to get there.
And by the way, for people that don't know much about Cowork, is like the way I think about it, it's like Claude with hands, where you can do stuff on your computer. Yeah. How would you describe it, just like in a sentence or two?
That's a good description. I actually haven't heard that, but I like that. I might use it more often, as Claude with hands. I also think about it as like, it's like Claude, but Claude is really good at taking all your garbage and then turning it into something nice. Like I think one of my favorite, like any sort of use case that I really like out of Cowork is just like giving it a folder of my stuff, and it doesn't really matter what's in that folder, but I'm able to extract something good out of it.
I've done that many times. Okay. Coming back to managing and being a manager and the role of a designer, I want to talk about hiring for a little bit. So seeing how much is changing in the role of a designer, what do you look for that's maybe new? Like, what do you now look for when you're hiring designers that you think is really important for them to be successful in this new world?
Well, I do think working specifically in the kind of environment that I do, there's just like a sense of like resilience and like roll with it kind of thing. That I think is really important, because yeah, so much is changing around us and you have to be really willing to adapt, to try out new methods, to try out new tools and learn stuff, as opposed to just like be stuck in the old processes and the old ways. But then I think about also there's probably 3 archetypes of folks that are really interesting to me right now. And I think these folks were already interesting to me before, but I feel like is in this era feels especially important. So the first one I would call is like strong generalists. So not just like regular generalists where they're like kind of good at a lot of things, but like people that are like almost like block shaped, in that T-shaped framework where it's like they're really good at like a few core skills, like 80th percentile good. I think this is like pretty rare and hard to hire for, to be honest. But I like this because the design role we've already seen is kind of like stretching and spanning, right? Like we're all becoming more PM shaped, we're all becoming engineering shaped. And so if you already have strong skills in a few different buckets, it's really easy for you to sort of like flex around and expand your role. So that's really exciting to me. It's just somebody who is really good at a bunch of things. Again, a huge ask. And then the other person that's really exciting to me is in that T-shaped framework, like a deep specialist, like someone is T-shaped, but like the tip of the T probably is like goes down farther than most other people. So folks that are maybe like the top, like 10% in the industry and whatnot. Again, super hard to find. And I feel very lucky that like, working at some of these places, like folks like these, you can sort of afford to hire them and actually bring them on board. And then my last one is probably the one that I think we're all overlooking, which is what I call the cracked new grad. It's just somebody who's like early career and feels kind of like wise and experienced beyond their years, but is also just like very humble and very eager to learn. I think this person is really interesting right now because I think most companies are just hiring like senior talent, like folks that have done things before, are super experienced. But given how much the roles are changing and what we're expected to do is changing, I think having somebody who almost has like a blank slate and is just like a really quick learner and is really eager to learn new tactics and stuff like that and doesn't have like all these baked in processes and rituals in their mind, that's super valuable. So I think those are the folks that I think a lot of us are just like overlooking, but I'm like really excited about.
This is awesome. On the deep T shape, what's an example of someone in design that has what's a skill that they're really good at?
Sometimes there's designers who are just like really technical in a way where they could be like 50% of software. They're basically a software engineer. Like that's really interesting, especially because right now, like a lot of it is, well, at least for us, it's like, you're working directly with the model. So it helps when you have just like deep engineering expertise. But another like deep kind of like specialist T is just, maybe they're just really good at like visual design or just like designing icons or something, where things like that, given that anybody can make anything, having that deep specialist slant feels like, oh yeah, they can really help differentiate the things that we're building.
Awesome. Okay. And then this block shape, we had Mark Andreessen on the podcast. We kind of called it the F shape or E shape, where there's like multiple T things, sideways F, sideways E, I guess. Is that what you're describing, where there's like many things you're really, really good at?
Yeah. And like basically, like, I don't know, if you almost had their skill set, it would look like a block, like
Because there's so many skills that like the T is spread out. Okay,
yeah.
Great. Okay. And the cracked new grad. So this is just like someone that is eager, like open-minded, gritty, very smart, I imagine, is a big part of it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
If someone's like a young designer, trying to break in, trying to be successful, what would your advice be to them to help them have a shot at joining Anthropic, for example?
I would just say just like build a bunch of stuff, like try a bunch of stuff out, build actual things. I think that can feel, I don't really know what the state of like design education or education is these days, but at least from like back when I was in school, like everything was very like theoretical and like, here, we're going to teach you some approaches and whatnot. But like the best kind of like cracked new grad folks I know are just like people who just like use the technology, build actual things, don't feel like limited by, how little experience they might have. I think that sometimes they're actually unburdened by that because like we have expectations of ourselves after being in the industry for so long, but they actually don't. And they sort of feel like anything is possible. And so just like building a bunch of stuff and sharing it with people and finding a community of folks that also do that. I think my one call here too is like, I went to a school that started something called Socratica, like a few years after, actually a while after I graduated. And basically their whole thing is like building stuff and showcasing it almost like a science project. And I think there's just been a really cool movement there of folks who just like build things and do things. Like, for example, somebody built this like Claude robot project. This was like a few years ago too, where they were just assembling robots that were running on Claude. And then somebody else did something where she just wanted to put googly eyes on a bus in Boston or something. And there's just like a sense of of both like agency in terms of like, yeah, we can just do stuff, but then also this community where people were just trying and building things and sharing things with each other. So whatever that looks like, given the, the school that someone's from or graduating from, yeah, doing that kind of stuff is the stuff that will make people stand out.
For current designers that are in a mid-career, awesomely senior, do you think you need to get technical and learn to code, at least build, or do you think you could be really successful and just not lean into that and get better at other stuff?
I think it definitely helps to maybe not like learn how to code so much that you're building something from scratch, but it does feel like more and more of the designer's vocabulary right now is implementing some stuff. I wonder though, as the models, both the models and the products get better, if like we probably will continue to like move up the abstraction layers, and you won't have to actually know how each single line of code will work. But I think what I would say is like start to bring that into your like toolkit, the coding tools, whether or not it's like you're actually becoming technical. I think any designer should just be really aware and like know how to use the tools that are at hand, as opposed to maybe like learning and like going off and learning React or et cetera, et cetera.
How good of a designer is Claude, would you say, or Claude Code, whatever you want to describe? Like, would you hire Claude as a designer, or is like not there yet?
I don't think Claude is there yet.
Okay.
Is there yet in terms of a designer you would hire. I think it is not yet the strong generalist or the deep specialist or the cracked new grad. I think it's pretty good at a first pass and at presenting a bunch of different ideas to you, but nothing there quite feels like special and hireable yet.
Which is good news for designers for now. It sucks at this for now. And I'm so curious to see how good it could get at this. That's like such a big open question is, can it pump out amazing, novel, unique creative experiences, or is it's just never going to be that good as a human designer?
I mean, it's gotten a lot better in the last year or so, even. So, yeah.
There's a couple management, rituals or takes you have that I've heard from folks that you work with that I want to touch on. One is that you have this hot take that low leverage time for managers is just not a thing, that there's a lot of benefit you can get out of things that people consider low leverage. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. I remember like first becoming a manager, and I think one of the pieces like of advice that I either got from a course or a book or something is like, now that you're a manager, you have to really prioritize your time and categorize your work. And there was like this 2x2 of like, I don't remember what it was in it, but you essentially say like, oh, these are the things that only I can do. These are the things anybody else can do. And everything else, like it's low leverage and you shouldn't do that anymore. And a lot of the low leverage things were just like, like things that are really nitpicky in the weeds, or just like literally, yes, probably somebody else could do those tasks. But when I think about like leaders and managers that I have respect the most, I actually think some of their best traits is that they choose like low leverage tasks that they take on themselves. And that actually ends up being actually a very high leverage thing because it's them who's doing it. So one example is whenever you have like senior leaders who just like test the shit out of the product and they're just like so in tune with it. And they dog food it, they repro the bugs, they spend a bunch of time with like engineers like sharing the logs and like nitpicking and stuff like that. And I think that ends up being like super actually high leverage, even though it's a lot of time of like nitty gritty time, because it creates this like familiarity with the product, which I think is really good. It also creates this vibe where it's like, oh yeah, this senior leader really cares deeply and they actually know the ins and outs of the product and they're rolling up their sleeves and they're giving this feedback and working with the team on it. And I think similarly to what I've seen is like when a senior leader is able to like fix a bug now, even like I think I've actually seen like Mike Krieger before like put in PRs himself, and it's really nice because it's like, okay, cool, like we're all on this team together and nothing is like below this person. And I think another thing that I love that's like a little bit more cultural is when somebody like goes out of the way to like make somebody's like anniversary card or something, and like vibe code them something super nice or make them a super nice card, because I think it just shows that it's like an EA or somebody can put together the card, but this leader is just somebody who cares so much about their team that they put in the effort. So that's something I try to embody, is like choosing the seemingly low leverage tasks that are like worth my time.
Yeah, that is so interesting. Like what you're saying there is, in a sense, like the low leverage stuff is the stuff that often has the most impact because your reports wouldn't expect you to spend time on this thing, and there's like the low leverage ends up being high leverage.
Yeah, and I think it's what makes like your style of leadership stand out or feel special to a certain person.
Amazing. Another, I don't know, ritual and kind of way of running teams that I heard about you is you encourage team members roasting each other, which on the surface doesn't sound like a wonderful environment. But on the other hand, I hear constantly that the teams that you've built are just the happiest, the highest performing teams. Talk about, I guess, this idea of roasting and encouraging that and just what you've learned about building awesome teams.
Yeah, I think it's not that I'm like, yo, you should roast each other. Like I'm not like forcing it in that way or anything. But when I think about the sort of psychological safety and teams and like people that just get along with each other, like when you think about your friends, you're always sort of willing to like push the boundaries a little bit and like roast them. Like you're roasting your friends a lot, but you actually might not be roasting your coworkers a lot because it's all just about like comfort and safety, right? So it's not that I'm like, oh, I want my teams to roast each other, but I think it can be a really good sign when the people on your team kind of feel comfortable just like kind of poking fun at each other a little bit. And I think that also can be a good sign when folks also feel the same way about like you as a leader, where it's like there's just an element of like they don't fear you as much, but they feel like there's a sense of safety where if they say something, they're not going to get fired. So an example of this is like with my last team, I feel like they would make fun of things that I would say at crits sometimes, like certain phrases I would say.
What's an example of that?
I don't know, like I would always be like, okay, like what are next steps? And like, how do we follow up on this? And then they'd be like, okay, like what are next steps? And they would sort of channel me in that way. Yeah, I just think it shows a level of like, okay, these people are like not necessarily afraid of me. They know that they trust me. They could trust me. And it's and then they sort of like know enough about each other and me, like personally in our personal lives, to be able to like know sort of where those boundaries are. But at the same time, I think the thing that you sort of err into in that territory is like, are you as a manager, are you friends with your reports? Which is, I think, a thing people tell you like not to do. And so the way I think about balancing this out is like this creates like the you have to create this sort of like baseline of psychological safety and people feel comfortable both with each other and with you. But you also have to make sure that they know that you have really high standards. And I think these two things can feel like they're at tension, but I think they work really well together because it's like once you have that psychological safety, you have people trusting each other and you applying the high standards actually, I think, becomes potentially easier because you can do it without fear, I think. And I sort of think about this from the approach of like kind of like being a tough parent a little bit, It's like, oh yeah, like my team, I work with them in a way where they know I'm always going to be there. And I'm not just going to fire them on a whim or something. But at the same time, they also know that I want the best for them, and that I have high standards and that, I'm working with them to make the best work possible. And so, yeah, that's the balance I think you just strike is like, can you create this environment of one where your team feels comfortable like roasting you, but at the same time, like they know they have to be doing great work and they will do great work with you.
That is awesome advice. It's interesting how often this just like management style comes back, or management, good management, it comes back, reminds me of what was it, radical candor. Just this combination of caring deeply and challenging directly.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I hear here is just make sure people know that you care deeply about them, but also be very direct and have high standards.
Yeah.
So interesting. Okay. Maybe a final question. I'm always looking for interesting frameworks and methods and processes that people have found useful in their work. And I hear you're a big fan of something called the legibility framework. Talk about this, talk about how you use it, why it's so valuable.
Yeah. This framework, I think I saw it on Twitter of maybe last year or something. And it was Evan Tana, who's a partner at SPC. He's a VC. So it basically is this like 2x2. I don't think it like got so much attention, but once I started seeing it, I like actually couldn't stop thinking about it. So on the 2x2, he basically has like founders. Like founders can be either illegible or legible. And then ideas can either be
illegible or legible. And basically he was saying that like, okay, if both the founder and the idea is like super legible, the idea is probably not that novel, and somebody's already like, they're already going to implement it or do it, and you're actually not finding something new. But then where it gets really interesting is where like the idea itself is illegible. And by illegible, he means like, oh, it's sort of like really, on the frontier, people might not get it yet, or like the way it's being told, it just doesn't, it's not like being told in the way that makes this most sense to people. And I think this is obviously a good way for a VC to operate, because you're trying to look for the opportunities that people don't see and put them out there in the world. But I also think that like part of the role of the designer, at least at a frontier lab at Anthropic, is kind of spotting the ideas that are illegible and trying to understand what's there and how to take that and like transform it, whether it's through storytelling or whether it's through like the actual UX and the form factor. And put it out there. And I think there's like when I mentioned, going through Slack and like looking at all the stuff that people are making, like that's kind of what I'm doing. I'm trying to see like, oh yeah, what are the ideas that are really, that like there's like some energy there around, but like might not make sense yet, that are worth me like thinking about more in my work. There's one good example actually that like ties to co-work, where there was this internal prototype that we called like Cloud Studio that I think somebody built like partway through last year. And it essentially was this like really kind of like dense, powerful interface that was built on top of some agentic harness. It might have been Claude Code at that point in time too. And it had all these like displays where it's showing you like all this knowledge and all these skills and things Claude was doing and like previewing its outputs. And I think to a designer, I looked at it and I was like, this is like, I don't know what's going on. I don't really get it. But then I sort of saw the folks in research, the folks building it, and just folks internally, there's just a lot of energy around it. And I was like, cool, like I think there's like something here, but I just don't understand it yet. And I think that really was an example of an illegible idea. And ultimately what came from it was like the skills framework, like the sort of like markdown files that instruct Claude on how to do something. So that came out of that specific prototype. That was not something I was directly involved in, and that was more of like, the folks working on this prototype extracted that out of it. But when it did come to work on Claude co-work, and I was thinking about like, oh yeah, what is the form factor for this thing? Seeing that prototype and seeing the kinds of information that people found really helpful, like seeing Claude's plan and to-dos, seeing Claude's like context and the files that it was going through, like those kinds of things are things that I ended up pulling out of that prototype into Claude co-work. So yeah, I think about like, how can designers almost be more like VCs in this way internally when we're looking at prototypes?
This is super interesting. I did a research project recently where with this guy, Terrence Rohan, a VC actually, we looked at what are patterns across people that have joined companies very early that ended up being massive successes, like Palantir and Stripe and Linear and Notion, all these companies, like people that have joined many of these companies early, what were they looking for? And one of the factors was the idea is so crazy that everyone's laughing at this. This is impossible. You're never going to do this. This is the craziest thing. Why would you even think like Palantir? Like OpenAI actually was one of them, just like some research lab doing some stuff. So it's interesting that, and it's not like every time this will work, and it's not like every crazy idea that makes no sense will be good. But I think what you're saying is pay attention to stuff that's like interesting to you and isn't totally clear. Maybe you can be the person that helps pull it together.
Yeah, that, but also like if there is some energy around it, but I don't quite always understand what the energy is, it's to like dive deeper and try to understand what that is. Yeah. Because I think people who often gravitate towards these early ideas, they can't always articulate why. And
That's
it's
so
sort of up to
interesting.
you to like dive deeper and understand that.
So there's 3 patterns we found. One of the other ones was there's just pay attention to people getting very excited about this thing, even if you don't get it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, sounds crazy. That's so interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
And then what was the other one? Oh, the founders are just like top 1% was the other piece there, which everyone at Anthropic already is. So you got that one. Oh man, Jenny, what a crazy time we're living through. What a world.
A crazy time.
So much change. Okay. Before we get to our very exciting lightning round, is there anything else that I should have asked you that you want to leave listeners with, that you want to double down on?
I think I just want to call out the Anthropic design team and shout them out just because it's a team of folks that are just really humble, and they're not always the loudest on social, but they're doing a lot of really great work. And especially through this time where our jobs are changing so much, the team is so resilient, and they sort of span this whole spectrum of people who are really technical and prototypey to all the way to folks that are really high craft and delivering stuff that's going out the door and is fabulous. And we are hiring throughout the year, so I just wanted to call that out. If I didn't scare you with the way that we work internally at Anthropic, if that sounds more exciting than terrifying, would love to connect.
What sounds exciting is getting access to these Slacks where you have all the features being built.
That's the core benefit.
Let's talk to super intelligence right now and tell me where I should invest. I'm just joking. And then in terms of hiring, is there anything specific that people should think about if they want to apply?
Think a little bit about the archetypes that I mentioned, especially the strong generalist and the deep specialist. Those folks we're really excited about. But generally, folks who are
the block and the deep
thing.
T.
The block and the deep T. What could we be talking about? Folks who feel like those archetypes resonate with them, but also folks that are just really excited about the technology, have been building a lot, and sort of want to be on the frontier.
Amazing. Well, with that, we've reached our very exciting lightning round. I've got 5 questions for you, Jenny. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Here we go. What are 2 or 3 books that you find yourself recommending most to other people?
The first one is The Power Broker by Robert Caro, which is an incredibly aggressive recommendation, given that it's like 1,100 pages. But I think in this era when our attention spans are so short, I think this is actually worth reading end to end, because I think there are very few like collections or memoirs where it spans through someone's entire life, and you sort of see how somebody changes throughout those decades. And it's also somebody who's really controversial too. And it's nice to sort of like read a really nuanced view of somebody, Robert Moses. And I think we just lose out on some of this like long arc thinking, because we're thinking so much about right now. So it's just an important reminder that careers are long, and is also really good for kind of understanding how somebody just gets things done really well. So Power Broker. The second one that I recommend to a lot of people is a book called Insomniac City, which is written by Bill Hayes, who was the partner of the scientist Oliver Sacks around the time that Oliver Sacks died. And it's just this like really beautiful kind of like ethereal memoir of Oliver Sacks' last days and their sort of love story. I think this has like very little to do with the stuff on your podcast, Lenny, but it's just a book that I really love, and just like makes you think about mortality, but also like love and life and stuff like that. So that's one of my favorite books.
My goal here is, we're trying to create Renaissance humans. So all of this other stuff is excellent.
Cool.
Interestingly, I saw Julie Zhu, famed design leader, was reading The Power Broker recently. I don't know what's going on over here. Spreading in design land. Okay. Do you have a favorite recent movie or TV show that you really enjoyed?
I watched A Sentimental Value recently. I watched it on a plane, which is, how directors want you to watch their films. But it's a Norwegian film by the same director who did The Worst Person in the World. I think just the pacing, the writing, the relationship between the characters is just really subtle and beautiful. It's basically about this family, sort of a family drama, but also about this house that they lived in their entire lives. It's beautiful because like the house is sort of a character. So I don't know what else to say about that, but that was a really good movie. And then I would also recommend, obviously, The Pit season 2. We're on that. I think everybody just likes to watch people who are really competent at their jobs do something. So yeah.
Imagine being an actor on that show, just like how much you have to learn and memorize all these terms.
Yeah. It just also seems really fast paced too. Like they do so much stuff in like one shot, and there's just so much like movement and stuff like that. Seems really, really hard to be an actor on.
And I only recently realized Noah Wiley was in ER as like a younger person, and now he's like the head of this.
Yeah.
Oh man. Okay. Favorite product you recently discovered that you really love, cannot be co-work?
Not one that I've actually discovered recently. But Retro, I've been using it for basically 2 years now since it came out. And I think I discovered new benefits of it recently. So for folks who don't know about Retro, it's sort of like this small community photo sharing app in which you can only share photos from each week, from a given week, as opposed to like all time. And it basically has like none of the social media stuff. Like you can't really see like counts. There's no ads, etc. But one really nice thing is now that I've been using it for 2 years, I can now look back at each year and see like, oh yeah, this week 2 years ago I was doing this, and it's become this really special way to like live through each week of my life, basically.
Wow. And it's also a beautifully crafted app if you're looking for building your own taste in design.
Yeah, designers love Retro.
I could see that. Okay. Do you have a favorite life motto that you often come back to in work or in life?
Yeah. Not sure if it's my favorite life motto, but one thing I do catch myself saying a lot is just, it is what it is.
My dad says that all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It sounds super defeatist, but I promise it's not. I think just given how much stuff is going on in the world right now, and especially with the industry and whatnot, you can't control everything. And so sometimes it is what it is, just like brings the levity you need to move forward.
I did a 10-day meditation retreat a while ago, and I came back from it, and it's like, Dad, you've been right all along. This is the answer to it all. It is what it is. You don't cling, don't try to change. Just, it is what it is.
It is what it is.
There's so much depth to that. I was like, okay, smarter than I even thought. Okay, final question, coming back to cowork. Is there, I don't know, mind-blowing use case, something just like, wow, that's so cool that cowork can do that? Either something you use it for, or you've heard somebody using it for.
One thing I really like is just like introspection. And so I have this folder basically of like local notes that I have that I use like IA Writer for. And I basically just like write whatever, and over the years have collected it with a bunch of different notes. And they span like all different things, like one-on-one notes, like random thoughts, like kind of like tiny memos, interview notes, etc. And my favorite, like it's cool to me, is just like using cowork to like analyze that and have insights out of it and actually create things out of it. So like anytime I can like learn something new about myself, like I love that. But I think a very practical thing I did with it the other day was like along the lines of hiring. I was like, oh yeah, I want to sort of articulate like what it is that I look for when I look for in design craft, because I think actually a lot of people struggle to articulate that. And I just had it read through all of my notes, both like interview notes and other things that I cared about and memos and stuff like that I've written in the past, and then it made me this rubric for evaluating that. So that kind of introspection where it's like, oh, I wouldn't have realized even these things about myself that I'd been putting out there implicitly. That's been really cool for me.
That is so cool. So just to make this very clear for people, you have a folder with all these things you've written, one-on-ones, meetings, like you could do, I don't know if y'all are allowed to use granola, something like that, like meeting transcripts, and ask it. And it's like, I was going to ask what prompt you use, but it's just like, read all these things I've written and help me probably just like understand how I feel about what is design craft.
Yeah, basically, I think it was like, hey, I have a bunch of interview notes and a bunch of notes related to design craft in this folder. Read it and then help me craft a memo / rubric for how I assess craft in interviews.
So cool.
Yeah.
Jenny, this was awesome. What a time to be alive.
What a time.
2 final questions. Where can folks find you online if they want to reach out, and how can listeners be useful to you?
Yeah. I'm on Twitter /X is what we're calling it these days. It's at Jenny_Wen. That's probably the best place. Not really on LinkedIn as much. So that's the best place. And how can folks be helpful to me? Send us your product feedback, like we're working on cowork, or anything cloud related, really. Just send us your feedback. We'd love to make it better for you.
Jenny, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, of course. It was great chatting, Lenny.
It was wonderful. Jenny, thank you. Bye, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. If you found this valuable, you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Also, please consider giving us a rating or leaving a review, as that really helps other listeners find the podcast. You can find all past episodes or learn more about the show at lennyspodcast.com. See you in the next episode.